hot,
live.
hot
Yeah.
mic.
That's why we pushed it off.
It's about a 40% if you factor the basement in as storage. So 40. Yeah.
Do the pledge. Here's the flag. Over there.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Isa Planning Board. Town of Isa Planning Board for July 19, 2023. If you're a member of the community who wishes to be heard this evening, there are yellow cards on the table. Please fill one out, name and address, and which application you're here to speak on. I remind all applicants to keep your presentations to 30 minutes or less, and remind members of the community to keep your comments to 3 minutes. That being said, can we all please stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Bay Shore 270 LLC, PB 2023-020, south side of Spur Drive South, 293 feet west of Fifth Avenue, County Route 13, Bay Shore 270 Spur Drive South. Applicant requested Planning Board special permits for 2 restaurants in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1K. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Good evening. Let me turn the mic. It's not on. Can somebody turn the mic on?
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Alyssa Solar Sinatra of Germano and Cahill, 4250 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite 275, Holbrook, New York, for the applicant Bay Shore 270 LLC. Also present with me tonight is Joseph Clemens of German and Clemens Architecture. And on behalf of the applicant, I have Mohammed Latif here as well. The applicant seeks, based on planning staff's recommendation, 2 special permits for restaurant uses at the premises located at 270 Spur Drive South in Bay Shore. It's located in the Industrial 1 zone, and site plan modifications are being requested as well. The granting of this application will allow the applicant to obtain an updated certificate of occupancy and allow him to reopen his business. I've handed to you recent photos of the site so you can see how it presently looks. The approximate half-acre site consists of a 1-story building of 4,420 square feet and a parking lot situated on Spur Drive South. To the north of the premises is Spur Drive South, and a forested area owned by the state and ramps to the Southern State Parkway. Directly to the west is an industrial building, and directly to the east is a gas station. To the south of the premises is a house. It's also zoned Industrial 1. The customer entrance to the premises is on the east side of the building. As an establishment or deli under the zoning code that existed at the time. The site has been operated as a food service establishment since the 1970s. The Suffolk County Health Department has been issuing approvals for each decade, beginning in 1976 through the most current one we have in September of 2022. These permits will establish that this establishment has been operating as a food service establishment for decades, and it's also been limited to 16 seats. The history of the site is significant in demonstrating that granting the special permits for restaurant use now will not materially change the way that this site has been operated. However, under the present zoning code, by definition, the building is too large to accommodate a deli or a minor restaurant. Upon planning staff's recommendation, the applicant is requesting 2 special permits for restaurant use. So like I said, it can obtain an appropriate certificate of occupancy to allow it to operate again. The operation of the premises will be as follows. There are 2 food service stations in the building on opposite sides of each other, and they will both be run by the same operator. One is a deli-style food service station serving breakfast sandwiches, paninis, salads, deli sandwiches. And the other station is for hot entrees. Two stations complement each other in that the deli style station will be open to the public for breakfast and lunch, and the hot entree style station will be open in the afternoon for lunch and dinner. While there is an anticipated overlap now in the lunchtime hours between 12 and 5 p.m. for food service, this should not create a concern for parking because, as we'll discuss again, the site is limited to 16 seats, and this establishment lends itself to takeout more than a sit-down style food establishment. And the floor plan that we have provided also reflects that there are 16 seats, which have historically been approved by the Suffolk County Health Department. Additionally, there will be retail areas for incidental products to like a deli style establishment. There is also an approved site plan, which was approved back in April 11th, 1975. The existing site is in significant conformance with this plan. In connection with the planning staff's recommendations, we submitted the approved 1975 plan along with this application and updated the same with improvements that were recommended, and we are also requesting certain modifications. With regards to parking, the approved site plan provides for 23 parking spaces, and in accordance with planning staff's recommendations, 24 are being provided along with a handicap space. However, based on the requested restaurant uses, we are seeking a parking relaxation of the required parking per the subdivision rules and regulations. I'll now introduce Joseph Clemens to discuss the proposed parking site and the relaxations requested.
Good evening to the board. My name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German and Clemens Architecture PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. With regard to the parking, the existing building is approximately 4,420 square feet. As you are aware, the facility currently operates with 2 restaurants within 1 open area. The uses themselves operate more similarly to 2 separate takeout establishments. This facility has been used in a similar manner as to what is proposed this evening for the past approximate 47 years. As such, there is no indication that parking would be a cause for concern. Per the Town of Islip subdivision and land development regulations, parking for such a use would be calculated in one of 3 ways. 16 seats divided by 2 would be 8 spaces. 4,420 square feet divided by 100 square feet is 44.2. Or 93 persons legally designed for within the establishment divided by 4 is 23.3 spaces. The site plan presented this evening provides for 24 spaces. As such, we would meet the criteria for 2 of the 3 calculations. With regards from the site perspective, as indicated, there was a previously approved site plan dating back to 1975, give or take. The configuration of the building, curbing, drainage, and sanitary per plan in comparison to the present conditions appear relatively consistent. The applicant is not requesting to make any alterations to the existing curbing or configuration that would generally require a formal site plan review. The existing landscaping areas within the front yard are to remain, however, are insufficient in size and compared to the current subdivisional land development regulations. The current site has a front yard of approximately 1,127 square feet, or 4.4%. The overall landscaping, excluding newly imposed buffer area, is 2,792 square feet, or 10.9% of the site. And the overall landscaping, including the buffer area, is 5,892 square feet, or 22.9% of the site. These figures align with the recommendations made forth in the provided special permit and site plan modification conditions. I will turn the microphone back over to Alyssa and answer any questions.
Okay, and just to circle back to the parking, we've also not received any records of any parking complaints that have ever been made. So now I'm going to turn over to another request we are making, which would be for relaxation for the overhead door that's located on the north side of the building. We're requesting relaxation of that the requirement that no overhead doors shall face a street, as the door is on an approved site plan from 1975. It's not used, and it also just faces a forested area. There are no homes across the street from it. We are also going to be making improvements according with planning staff's recommendations. One is that the applicant will repair the front sidewalk and curbing along Spur Drive South. A dumpster enclosure is going to be added to the southeast portion of the parking lot. And a walk-in fridge and concrete patio are going to be removed to make room for additional landscaping, such as the buffer to the south. So based on the foregoing, we believe that the proposed application will allow the owner to reopen in a similar fashion that the site has been historically operated. The applicant is very eager to open an approved and well-run establishment, and he would love to serve the community again. Due to the existence and conformance with the previously approved site plan and the proposed improvements to be made in accordance with staff's recommendations, we also further request that site plan review is waived. We are also in the process of working out some proposed conditions that Ms. Wozniak provided this afternoon to us. And we respectfully request that the board grant this application for special permits for restaurant uses to be issued along with the proposed site plan modifications. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to public hearing, then we'll come back for comments from the board. You want to just call them up, Kevin?
Akhtar Ali. Mr. Ali, when you come up, just give your address for the record.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Akhtar Ali. My address is 250 Spur Drive South. I'm here for the exit 42 daily, which is 270 Spur Drive South. It is walking distance from my house. It was really convenient for us to go shop and take our family there for food. And it was really convenient for all Bayshore community, which is we have a large community in Bayshore. So I really request the board to reopen the store, please.
Thank you.
Mohammed Suhal.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Suhail. I live on 1524 Pine Acres Boulevard, Bayshore. I don't know if any one of you have eaten in the deli. Next to the deli, there's a restaurant which is halal food according to our Muslim faith. And I've been going there for many years. Very, very delicious food. Since it's closed, many families who live around, town probably knows very well there is an Islamic center about a mile away south on the Farrington and East 3rd Avenue. There about 500 people crisscross that Islamic center on a weekly basis. And they all, when they come there, they go and look for the halal food in the area, and this was the best place to go there. It's been closed for over a year, I guess, now, and families are quite devastated. I would request the town if they can open this place. In addition to this, I've been on the board of Islamic Center also. The owner of this restaurant has been very generous to the community, and he has been actually sponsoring the lunch for the kids in the school, which is attached to the mosque on daily basis, I guess. So this has been a good place for the Muslims to go and eat there, and the owner has been also very helpful to the community. So I will request the town to please consider this favorably and open the restaurant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Edward Catter.
It's okay for the day you open again because.
Just pull the mic down so people can hear you. There you go. Perfect.
Yes, my name is Edward Kadir. My address is 119 Market Boulevard, IC, New York. we'd like to have this deli to open again, please, so we can have some food from over there, but we live close by there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ed Shadu, Hague? Hog?
Good evening. My name is Ed Sham Haq. I live at 474 Kaim Avenue, West Islip. This Exit 42 deli was a very convenient place for us for halal food. We used to go there. And if it's open again, it'll be very convenient and easy to take our family there. It's close by. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody who came in late who did not fill out a card who wishes to be heard? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the south side of Spur Drive, west of Fifth Avenue in Bay Shore, and it's improved with the one-story, 4,400 square foot building. The site was originally designed for an industrial use back in the 70s, however, has been operating as a deli and gyro restaurant without the benefit of a CO for over 10 years. These two establishments were shut down by county police back in October for selling drugs. In addition, the town's fire marshal office did issue several violations, which include operating without a CO, unpermitted outdoor storage, and other safety violations. The applicant has stated these previous tenants have been removed from the building, and he's looking to clean up the site and legalize the two restaurant uses to allow for a deli and hot food restaurant. The floor plan is a little bit unique in that both restaurants share common space with shared seating. The applicant is also requesting a site plan waiver and a 44% parking relaxation. The site is proposed to be restored back to the original approved site plan with the addition of handicap parking and a dumpster enclosure. The applicant is proposing to add some much-needed landscaping, and as stated, the two restaurants will only have overlapping hours of operation during lunchtime, which may help alleviate potential parking issues. Planning has also reached out to the fire marshal's office, and some of the violations have been resolved. However, the remaining violations require approval from this board before they can be fixed. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the proposed conditions, which do require additional site improvements that include removing the overhead door facing Saxon Avenue and providing buffer plantings to the south of the building.
Mr. Frugieri?
Kelly, just one clarification. So there's still going to be a deli and a restaurant, but according to the applicant, there's different operators? It's not the same operators that were dealing the drugs?
Correct. That's what I was told.
Okay. Is that the fact from the applicant?
Can the applicant answer that?
We're going to have a completely different operator that will be operating both sides of the south. The tenant who was doing the distribution is completely gone.
Okay. All right. Even with that said, I would recommend that should this be approved, that we notify the Suffolk County Police Department when they open up so they can do patrols.
So have you reviewed the conditions?
Yes, we reviewed the conditions. One of the conditions that we were concerned with was the removal of the overhead door. We were wondering if that it was part of the pre-approved site plan from 1975. The client doesn't use that door, it's just existing there and taking it down would be a substantial cost and a burden. It's facing, it does face the street, but it is facing a forested area owned by the state. There are no homes in the vicinity of it.
Staff has asked that it be removed. I would support staff on that, and especially if there's no use for it. Ms. Moriarty, did you have something? Did a hand up? Did you? I thought you had a hand up. Yeah. Right. We can put a time period on there that it has to be removed by. It doesn't be done on day one, but we would want it removed. Okay, if they're in agreement on that, we can come up with a reasonable time period. I think we're okay to move forward on this application. If you're not in agreement to remove it, then obviously we'll reserve this evening and you guys can have discussions with planning staff. You tell me what direction you want to go in. Go right ahead. All right. Well, okay. Is there a motion? Mr. Frugieri?
I'll make a motion that we close this public hearing and grant this application, subject to the conditions that have been drafted by planning, with an addition of one condition, or modifying one condition with regard to the overhead doors, that we allow the applicant and planning to work out a reasonable timetable to remove the overhead doors.
Is there a second? Second. So motion by Ms. Frugieri to grant the close public hearing, grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Only modification is putting a reasonable time frame in to remove the door, to be agreed upon between planning staff and the applicant. Second by Mr. Brown. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, Steve Bavaro, SP 2021-082, southeast corner of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A and Wyandanch Avenue, East Islip, 42 and 44 East Main Street. Applicant requests a buffer, parking, landscaping, and dimensional relaxations in connection with the proposed parking lot expansion for a mixed-use property. Good evening to the applicant.
You guys want smaller ones or full sets? I have 11 by 17s. Whatever you prefer.
You're going to have to speak loud because I'm not sure if they got that working yet, so.
The application before you is for 42-44 East Main Street in East Islip, for the proposed parking lot. The parking lot will require relaxations for bumpers of
It doesn't work.
the south, east, and west buffer. The east buffer is adjacent to the commercial property. That buffer is up against that adjacent property's existing parking lot. The west buffer is adjacent to Wyandanch Avenue. The south buffer is adjacent to a dwelling that is in a zone, business one zone, and has an existing dwelling on that property. We have support letters from the two neighbors to the south of the proposed parking lot. I gave copies of those letters to the board. These neighbors would be most affected by the parking lot. They are in support of the parking lot that is going to be proposed, because it would help prevent the overflow parking caused by subject properties not having the parking that is necessary for the property. Property also will require relaxation of the required parking space due to the limitations of the size of the lot. We feel that we have maximized the number of spaces within the limitation of the lot size that has been given to us. Properties that are directly to the east and western property have similar relaxations on their own properties. property to the west is the firehouse, and their buffer is very similar to what we're asking for. They have a 6-foot buffer, we're asking for an 8.7. The buffer that is also against the resident, that west property, there looks to be about a 1 foot to 2 foot buffer on the west side of that property that the firehouse is on. And that is very similar to what we're asking for on the east side of our property. We'd like to submit, I have actually submitted the photographs and the aerial map that shows the adjacent properties and how they're similar to what we're asking.
Thank you. We have all the stuff you submitted, and we'll make that part of the record. Are there, nobody signed up to speak on this? Anybody come in later wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just as a quick recap, this project consists of 2 parcels, about 1/3 of an acre total, Zone Business 1. Lot 7 is currently improved with a little over a 3,000 square foot building, currently CO'd for a massage therapist on the first floor and 4 apartments on the second floor, CO'd in 1959. The adjacent Lot 8 is improved with a little under 1,500 square foot office building, CO'd in 1950. Proposal is to combine those lots and construct a formal parking area behind the rear of the buildings. The current site maintains a virtual non-existent buffer to the south and no formal striped parking lot, as the pavement area is substandard in quality and can only accommodate approximately 3 vehicles. All overflow parking directs vehicles to parking along Wyandanch Avenue and along the property frontage and the shoulder on Montauk Highway. 13 standard parking stalls with typical screening will be provided where 22 are required. There's a refuse enclosure relocation, street trees will be provided, and the proposed buffer will measure slightly less than 9 feet, but will still be planted fully per the town's requirements. The buildings and their uses will remain as is. These improvements to the buffer, alleviating the overflow of on-street parking, the refuse relocation, are significant upgrades to the property that should have a positive effect on current site issues. As we see no public comment, staff has drafted site mod conditions for approval.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Is the applicant okay with the restrictions, covenants and restrictions? Is there a motion?
Chairman, I'll make a motion. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to grant the application, close the public hearing based on the staff report.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing, grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions, second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, David Walkoff, SP 2021-094, southwest corner of Wilshire Boulevard and Rodeo Drive, Brentwood, 80 Wilshire Boulevard. Applicant requests landscaping, parking, dimension, and curb cut offset relaxations in connection with the construction of an industrial building. Good evening.
Good evening to the board. My name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German and Clemens Architecture PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of the applicant and property owner, Mr. David Walkoff of Edgewood Land LP, in regards to the 20.02 acre parcel situated in the Industrial 1 zoning district on the southwest corner of Rodeo Drive and Wilshire Boulevard, with a property address of 80-90 Wilshire Boulevard, Brentwood, New York, 11717, property tax map number 0500-133-09 2.1. This application presented before you requests landscaping, parking dimension, and curb cut offset relaxations in connection with construction of an industrial building. To provide a brief history of the subject parcel, the site is currently improved with an existing 1-story industrial building of approximately 231,000 square feet, which is recognized as 80 Wilshire Boulevard. Initially, this subject property was involved with a requested site plan modification, SP 2014-047, back in December of 2014, and was approved by the planning board at the time. That application included a parking relaxation, landscaping relaxations, and a modification of drainage design. Site plan approval was obtained, and subsequently a building permit to construct was issued thereafter back in June of 2019. At that time, the initial site plan approval, the submitted plans had shown the future 1-story, 156,000 square foot industrial building, which is to be 90 Wilshire. An application was made to the engineering department back in December of 2021 to commence the review process for this proposed building. Due to minor revisions to the proposed plan and due to alterations made within the field at the time of the construction for 80 Wilshire Boulevard building, relaxations and site plan modifications are now requested as a result.
Mr. Clemens, I'll tell you that we've reviewed the application. We have very few or limited questions. If you want to, you're welcome to give your entire presentation, or you're welcome to cut to the chase on it.
Understood. I'll speed it up.
Whatever you prefer.
Realistically, the landscaping relaxation we're going for is 0.38% of the overall lot. And most of the other requests are consistent with the previously approved plan. If you do happen to have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you. We have no comment cards on this. Anybody come in late wish to be heard? I don't see anyone. I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to kind of give a summary of the application, it does have a bit of history, just for the record. So this is a 20-acre parcel, zone industrial 1, has a current building of a little over 230,000 square feet, which was given a 2019 building permit. This property was comprised of 2 previous parcels, the westerly 15 acres being part of the 2003 Heartland Business Center expansion, which are subject to certain conditions of the planning board final resolution for that industrial park. In short, 17 acres were preserved as one contiguous parcel and dedicated to the town, which abuts this property to the west. Due to that dedication, each individual site within that industrial park was permitted to provide half of the landscaping requirements, so 10% overall, 5% in the front yard. The easterly 5 acres of the property was part of the 1984 Heartland Business Center, which is subject to different conditions, standard 20% overall landscaping, 10% front yard. And by condition of a 1984 final resolution, 10% of that site was also required to remain in its natural state. A 2014 site plan application was brought before the planning board for certain modifications, parking, drainage, and a transfer of partial landscaping requirements from the east side to the west side. As part of that transfer, the 10% natural area was moved to the adjacent westerly 17-acre natural area. At the end of that process, the landscaping requirement for the overall 20-acre site was 109,000 and change, and front yard was a little under 55,000 square feet. The second building, which is 156,000 square feet, was contemplated for future development as part of that site plan application. So this current site plan application is essentially the same proposal. However, the project was to be completed in phases, and that's the proposal before the board tonight with minor revisions. So just as a summary for those revisions, the curb cut from Wilshire Boulevard was shifted further to the north and now requires an offset relaxation to the property line. It does encroach 3 feet onto the adjacent property, but that is owned by the same entity. So as part of the conditions, there will be a formal recorded easement agreement between the two, which should not be a problem since it's the same individual. Landscaped islands on the connecting portion between the 2 former parcels have been removed from the proposal. Combined with the curb cut relaxation, have reduced the overall landscaping on site from 12.53% to about 12.2%. So based on the minor reduction in landscaping and the overall intent of the project remaining intact, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Ms. Clemens, do you want to add anything?
At this point.
Are there any questions from the board? Is there a motion?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman,
Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd make a motion to close tonight's hearing and to grant the application subject to the conditions that we've just described.
It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? The application is granted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, David McIntyre, North SP 2022-051. I should state for the record that Mr. Bruno recused on the last application. David McIntyre, SP 2022-051, northwest corner of Saxon Avenue and Essex Street, Bay Shore, 96 Saxon Avenue. Applicant requests relaxations of parking, landscaping, dimensional requirements, an overhead door facing the right-of-way, and to utilize crushed stone parking area in connection with an existing oil repair facility. Good evening.
Good evening to the board. Once again, my name is Joseph Clemens, a partner within the firm German & Clemens Architecture PC, located at 3275 Veterans Memorial Highway, Suite B11, Ronkonkoma, New York, 11779. I'm speaking to you this evening on behalf of the applicant, Mr. David McIntyre of No Limit Auto Body, with regards to the 0.38 acre parcel situated in the Industrial 1 zoning district on the northwest corner of Saxon Avenue and Essex Street, with a property address of 96 Saxon Avenue in Bay Shore. The application presented before you requests relaxations of parking, landscaping, dimensional requirements, existing overhead doors which face the right-of-way, and the request to utilize a crushed stone parking area in connection with an existing auto repair facility. Provide a brief history of the site. An application was previously made by Mr. Paul Calabrese in March of 1974, which was TC 2387, to request the use of the building for an auto body repair shop and auto paint shop. Specific conditions were placed on the property as is typically done by the boards. The intent of our application was to meet the requirements of those initial conditions, some of which include the following along with others. Basically, that the cars which are set for repair would be not stored in the front of the building. All cars in for repairs will be parked in the rear of the building or behind a 6-foot-high chain link fence. An applicant owner agrees to basically provide a refuse enclosure. In May of 1977, Mr. Calabrese requested a special permit for an extension of the auto body shop, which was TC 2619. Both applications were granted. It does not appear, however, that the town has an approved site plan on file for the improvements which were proposed. In response to early conversations held between our office, the client, and the town of Islip staff, and in an attempt to move the application along, our office submitted a certificate of compliance application to the building department on December 14th of 2022. Feedback was then received via the zoning department, indicating that a formal site plan submission was to be submitted to the town of Islip Engineering Department, one which took into consideration the current subdivision and land development regulations, while also working with the existing conditions of the subject property. The existing site has an auto repair building with associated office area of approximately 2,066 square feet and a repair garage of approximately 1,219 square feet. The total building has an area FAR of 19.8%, well below the allowed 35%. This use would require approximately 22 spaces. However, 13 spaces are currently provided on the site, thus the request for a parking relaxation. Taking into consideration feedback which our office received from the engineering staff, the subject site has been reworked to maintain the existing building structures while providing new concrete curbing and asphalt for the primary parking areas, attempting to maximize the usability. In doing so, dimensional relaxations were requested along both Saxon Avenue and Essex Street to allow 5 feet of landscaping and 5'6" of landscaping respectively, instead of the minimum required 8 feet. New drainage structures are also to be installed to accommodate rainwater. Compliant site lighting is to be installed. A telephone pole, which is currently in Essex Street, is to be relocated within the right-of-way. The property will be enhanced with street trees and yew hedges to screen parking areas. The amount of landscaping which is to be provided is a dramatic increase, as the front yard landscaping proposed is 15.7% of the site, and the total landscaping is approximately 23.2% of the site. And if you are familiar with the property, there is presently little to no landscaping. Taking into consideration the previous conditions, a new refuse enclosure is to be installed. Also, the required 5 service vehicles, which are to be stored for repair, are to be parked in the rear of the building behind a 6-foot-high fence screened from public view. This is the area where crushed stone was requested in lieu of pavement. This area is also set back approximately 45 feet from Essex Street, well greater than the originally stipulated 20 feet. As you can see from the plan set before you, my client simply wishes to establish and maintain a property which conforms with the general intent of the Town of Islip subdivision and land development regulations, while also maintaining the existing structures and uses. The improvements requested will become a benefit to the community and enhance the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. As stated, new street trees and continuous yew bushes will be added, which will enhance the look of the site and conform with the Town of Islip standards. This proposal will be a vast improvement from that of the blighted property which presently exists there today. As such, we would respectfully request that you grant the requested relaxations presented before you this evening so that my client can convert this eyesore of a site into a pleasant neighbor, and we can continue to enhance the Bay Shore community. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any cards. Did anybody come in later wish to be heard on this? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an industrial 1 zoned 3rd-acre parcel improved with 2 one-story buildings. The first building originally CO'd in 1969 as a warehouse, garage, and office, In 1974, the town board granted an auto body repair and paint shop with a further extension in 1977. The second building was constructed around 2010, however, never obtained site plan approval or a building permit. In February, as Mr. Clemens stated, the planning commissioner did extend the time to complete the required improvements associated with that town board action, and that is the basis of this site plan application. Per the town board action, all cars in for repair must be parked in the rear of the building or behind a 6-foot-high fence along the south side of the building, but not closer than 20 feet to Saxon Avenue. The applicant is proposing the required 5 stalls in the rear of the second building secured by a fence and gate. Relaxations are required for parking, landscaping along the street frontages, a gravel parking area instead of a paved, and an overhead door facing the right-of-way, as well as sidewalk mitigation along Essex Street. Overall, the basis of the site plan matches the intent of the original town board grant, and in regards to existing conditions versus proposed, this plan is a significant upgrade to the overall aesthetic and condition of the property. So based on that, staff recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Mr. Bruno? Was that a hand up? Okay. Any questions from the board? Ms. Gonzalez, just to be clear, so the second building was put up without approval?
That is correct.
So just speak to that. I mean, we put up a building without approval, knowing that we can't put a door facing the right-of-way of the street, and now we're here seeking approval for that?
My client was not part of that. He has taken over since that time. I don't know who Mr. Paul Calabrese is or if he was involved with the property at that point, but that was well before me. We're trying to legalize it, though.
That second building went up?
As Tanner said, I think it went up around 2010.
About 2010. It was intended on the original approval, but they just never followed through with the actual process of it. They just built it, so.
That's why we're here.
Right, and Tanner, we had other applicants on that block in the past that we didn't allow doors facing on Saxon Avenue in the past?
I don't recall any off the top of my head, but that building is existing and CO'd, so the only new door that would be considered for this application would be the one on Essex Street.
All right,
That's the one they're asking the relaxation for.
Yes.
Yes, the other two are approved. I'm, it's integral part of the business, unlike the previous application where they had a door that was not part of the business. Obviously, it's been there since 2010, well before your applicant took it over. And you are making quite a bit. I mean, the place is a disaster right now. It looks like crap. It looks like garbage. It really makes the community look horrible. I think you guys are doing a great job in terms of improving that community. If we can get the people next to you, just north of that, to clean up a little bit, I think we'd be in good shape. So I will support it for those reasons. Is there anything further you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Is there a motion? Mr. Bruno?
Make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application subject to conditions.
Thank you. There's a motion by Mr. Bruno to close the public hearing, grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed? One in opposition, Mr. Brown. Abstentions? The application is granted. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, site plan modification, public hearing, Justine Rupolo, SP 2022-058, east side of Railroad Avenue, 268 feet south of Hinding Street, Sayville, 199 Railroad Avenue. Applicant requests relaxations of buffer parking, landscaping, and permission to locate an overhead door facing a residential zone in connection with the construction of a new one-story retail building.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is William Garbarino, 40 Main Street, Sayville, New York. This is an application to construct a new building on this property on the east side of Railroad Avenue and to continue the existing building that's there at that site, which is north of the site. This property has been occupied by a liquor store since the 50s, when it was known as Dobbs Liquor. This building itself, where the present liquor store is, was the original Fiella's paint store, which was built and operated back in 1928. The history of this property, it's been in the Rapolo family for 45 years as a liquor store. They bought it subsequent to Dobbs Liquors being there, and they've operated in the community for all that time. In the late 80s, they purchased the property, which is attached store to two other properties which they don't own. What we're asking for here is to construct this building, the new building, 3,774 square feet on the east side of Railroad Avenue with a 15.7-foot front yard where a 1 foot minimum is required and a maximum of 25 feet is allowed. Our side yard is 20 feet where a zero side yard is required. Our total side yard is 20 feet where zero total side yard is required. A rear yard of 36.3 feet is provided where a 10-foot rear yard is required. We are proposing in this application to allow the existing store to remain with a front yard of 2.2 feet, zero side yards, total side yards of 128.8 feet, and a rear yard of 77.8 feet in connection with this application. It will not be occupied by a liquor store, but it'll be occupied as a retail store. As to the specifics of the request tonight for parking relaxation, landscape relaxation, I'm going to have John Bracco, who's the architect, address the board with those specifics.
Thank you.
And then we would like to hear from the town and then keep it open for our rebuttal on any questions that the town raises.
Rebuttal, you're assuming things.
Well, you always assume. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bracco?
Good evening, members of the board. John Bracco, architect, 111 Railroad Avenue, Sayville, New York. In regards to the parking relaxation, 27 parking spaces are proposed where 74 parking spaces are required, representing a 63.5% relaxation. 33 of those 74 parking spaces are for the existing and proposed unfinished, unconditioned basements, which are and will be used for nothing but storage and mechanical equipment, but were required to be calculated at the retail rate of one space for every 150 square feet. 41 parking spaces are what is required for the existing and proposed retail stores and the existing second floor apartment, representing a 34.1% relaxation. And even if we counted the basements to what I would say is the closest requirement in the town's table of minimum required parking spaces, which would be manufacturing, industrial warehouse, 1 per 1,000 square feet, we would need 5 spaces for that basement area totaling 46, which would be a 48% relaxation, which is still less than the 52% relaxation that was granted in 2014 for 226 Railroad Avenue, Brinkman's Hardware across the street, where 131 spaces were required and 64 spaces were provided as part of their change of zone by the town board per TC 5150 and SP 2013-090. I would like to note that the Rapolos would have no problem with a condition of the approval being that both the existing and proposed unfinished basements can only be used for storage and mechanical equipment. In addition, a parking relaxation was granted as part of the planning board approval for this subject parcel for a proposed 4,000 square foot retail building in 1989. The building was never built at that time. Lastly, J&J Spirit Shop's busiest hours, like most liquor stores, are between 5 and 9 p.m. every evening. In an effort to have less overlap in parking need between the two retail spaces, we are proposing that the new retail establishment that would be occupying the existing retail space would be limited to the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. Therefore, the second retail space would be closed during the vast majority of the liquor store's busiest hours. In regards to the buffer zone relaxation, we are providing the required 25-foot landscape buffer on the east property line, and we are asking for a 5-foot or 20% relaxation on the south property line by providing 20 feet. I would like to point out that there was a similar application for this property for a proposed 4,000 square foot retail building in 1989, asking for the same 20-foot buffer on the south property line, which was approved by the planning board. Furthermore, I think it is important to note that the adjacent property to the south is also owned by the Rapolos, who own the subject parcel. Lastly, the planning board has previously approved buffer relaxations of 9 feet and 15 feet for 226 Railroad Avenue, Brinkman's Hardware, as well as a 15-foot relaxation for 229 Railroad Avenue, both of which are within a 200-foot radius of the subject parcel. In regards to the landscape relaxation, we are providing a 25-foot landscape buffer across the entire east property line and a 20-foot buffer across the entire south property line. The area of landscaping within those two buffers is 6,395 square feet. The actual area of site that is landscaped is 8,859 square feet, which is 34.1% of the site, which is way over the required 20%. However, because we're not allowed to count the landscape buffers in our landscape calculation, the remaining landscaped area other than the buffers do not meet the required 20% total and 10% front required landscape areas. In addition, similar front and total landscape relaxations were approved by this board in 2014 for 226 Railroad Avenue, Brinkman's Hardware, which is directly across the street. And last relaxation, in regards to the overhead door facing a residential zone, the proposed overhead door is 8 feet wide and 8 feet high, which is the same width and just 1 foot higher than a typical residential overhead door. At its closest point, it would be 41 feet from the east property line, which abuts the residences. Per the engineering department's request, we have heavily screened the area between the overhead door and the east property line with extensive landscaping consisting of 3 deciduous trees, a double row of 6-foot-high evergreens, 5 feet on center, and the typical buffer zone fencing of 6-foot-high chain link with 6-foot-high stockade fencing attached, which will be installed on the east property line. We understand the intent of the code here, but we feel this is a unique situation in that a truck cannot pull behind the building, let alone through the overhead door. The door is there simply to have a wider opening to easily transport inventory from a delivery truck parked in the parking lot into the building with a hand truck. The delivery truck generally comes in the morning, either before the store has opened or just after it has opened in the morning when the store is not busy. That really addresses all the required relaxations. And if you have any questions, myself, Mr. Garbarino, will be more than happy to try to answer them.
Thank you. We have no cards on this. Anybody coming late who wishes to be heard? Want to just say your name and address for the record and then fill out a card on the way out. Microphone. Go right to the microphone.
My name is Amy Hutchison, and I have lived behind J&J Liquors for 25 years. I am their neighbor directly in the back. The only thing that separates us is a stockade fence. I just want to say they have been perfect neighbors all along. When my husband and I first moved there, we were concerned about having a wine store behind our house. Presently, we find it as a major convenience. It's nice to have people come over and say, I'm just going to go visit the backyard and pick up some wine. But no, I just want to say they have been perfect neighbors. Any requests that we have made as neighbors as far as cutting trees, keeping the property looking wonderful, the dumpster is always clean. So I would want to just say that as a neighbor, we are all in favor of this plan.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez. Yes? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Hank Brinkman. I, along with my family, own and operate Brinkman's across the street from this application. I'm here in full support of the application and all the requested variances. These variances being requested are very similar to the variances that were granted to my family and our business across the street. We were given a large parking relaxation, and we've never encountered a parking issue. As a retailer, parking is of the utmost importance, and we've never had an issue. At our business, we also have a roll-up door that faces the residences behind us. This door never came into question during our application. I'm going to assume that maybe this is a newer part of the code. But I can also testify that it's never caused an issue. And I know this because we have a application in front of the Brookhaven Planning Board where we're building a new store, and we asked our neighbors to testify as to, how we are because we do abut a residential neighborhood there as well. And the neighbors behind us all gave us glowing letters of not having issues and us being good neighbors. So I don't think that these setbacks or the roll-up door cause an issue. And lastly, I'd like to mention that it's in my experience that these requested variances are often what help the economics of a project like this for the owner to develop the building to a higher aesthetic level, as well as maintaining the grounds to that level. They help, increase the square footage, and that helps. It helps the owners take care of the property to a higher level. So I hope this board can grant the application and all the variances, and appreciate you hearing me.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard on the application? Come on up.
I'll chime in real quick. I'm Ben Brinkman, as my brother just spoke. So yeah, together we own the hardware store across the street, and I'll just like to double down on everything he said. I'm here in support of that application, this application. I hope to see it approved. Yeah, we work right across the street, work with my family every day. Most days it's a pleasure. Other days it's nice to have a bottle of wine right across the street. So I agree with Amy on that. And, but yeah, no, it's a great application. We want our downtowns to survive. We want retail to survive. It's more competitive than ever out there with online retailers, with big box retailers. We need to be, to support our downtown retailers and allow them to innovate and increase efficiencies and survive. So yes, I'm all in for it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard on the application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a split zone business district and business one property, about half an acre. As Mr. Garbarino stated, it is currently improved with a two-story building that contains a liquor store on the first floor, an apartment on the second floor, which was CO'd in 1965, and a 960 square foot detached garage in the rear of the property. The proposal is to relocate the existing liquor store to a new approximately 3,800 square foot one-story building on the south side. This includes the removal of the existing garage, a reconfiguration of the parking lot, and providing buffers to the east and south, along with other site improvements. The vacated space in the existing building has no planned tenant at the moment, per the applicant's representative. However, it is anticipated to eventually be a retail business. In 1988, the planning board granted a parking relaxation, 30 stalls provided where 39 were required, or about 23% for this property, along with a buffer relaxation to the south to allow 20 feet instead of 25 feet. That was for a proposed 4,000 square foot building in the same location it is being proposed now. The site plan was approved the following year. However, the project never came to fruition and nothing was built. The requested relaxations for the application tonight are as follows: a 20-foot instead of 25-foot buffer to the south, 27 parking stalls provided where 73 are required, almost 9.5% overall landscaping instead of 20%, 3.66% front yard landscaping instead of 10%, and permission to locate an overhead door facing a residential use to the east. As stated before, the same 20-foot buffer to the south was previously approved by the planning board in 1988, and the full buffer planting requirements are still being provided for that side of the property. About 4,800 square feet of gross floor area between the two buildings is unfinished basement that will be storage. However, those areas, although not accessible to the public, must be calculated at the principal uses requirements, which is retail in this case. But if you used the parking calculation for storage, which we typically do, but just not in this zone, which is 1 per 1,000 square feet, it would bring the parking requirement down to 45 stalls, which is a 40% parking relaxation. The prior approved 1989 plan at the time factored the buffer into the site's landscaping from what staff can see, as the regulations were different back then. Today, as 25 feet along the south and east is considered buffer, that green space cannot count towards the landscaping figure. And in addition, given the existing building, the curb cut, the property cannot meet the front yard landscaping requirement. So That cannot be met, but overall, the property is proposing more landscaping on site than currently exists. Lastly, the overhead door on the east side of the new building, although facing the rear yard of those residences, is not accessible by a truck. It is only hand cart deliveries. It will be heavily screened not only by a privet hedge adjacent to that door, but also a fully planted 25-foot buffer. So staff would see if we have any board comments, and if we could put conditions together if there's an agreement for moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to, I lived in Sayville for over 40 years, and I've frequented the parking lot as voted on the Brinkman application and frequent that store. And I can attest that there's no proper parking issues at the Brinkmans. You know, I go there through the holidays and everything. And the parking relaxation there absolutely worked. And I would agree that it would work with this also. It's at our discretion which way we're going to do the calculation. It's at the planning board's discretion. And I would agree with Tanner that this is not going to be retail, the basement on this store. It's going to be used for storage. We could put it in the covenant restrictions that it could be used for mechanical and storage. So I think that would work. An 8x8 door on the back facing residential, which you're going to use hand carts to deliver liquor in and out of. I don't think that would be an issue with a 25-foot buffer. And I also like the fact that the hours that you have with the retail coming in and the new liquor store would not be conflicting. So there'd be no conflict in the parking lot with the hours. So with that being said, I would support the application.
Further comments or questions from the board? I would just support Mr. Brown said. I'd also just want to put on the record that it's obviously a much smaller overhead door than other ones we're talking about. And it's going to be screened in addition to the 25 feet. So it differentiates from other applications we've seen in that regard. I guess they're selling alcohol out of there. I did not get any samples this evening to verify that it was alcohol, but we'll still probably go ahead with the application. Are you okay with working out the conditions if we condition it upon the?
Yeah, they would be pretty standard, but just based on the relaxations that it requires.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
With that being said, based on the staff report and with the conditions being approved with staff and the client, I would make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application.
Motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and grant the application, subject to the covenants and restrictions being agreed to by the planning staff and the applicant. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, planning board application, public hearing, EB at Vets Highway LLC, EB at Vets Highway 2 LLC, PB 2023-011, northwest corner of Veterans Memorial Highway, State Route 454 and Fuerten Avenue, Ronkonkoma, 3555 Veterans Memorial Highway, 1734 Fuerten, if I'm saying that right, Verizon Avenue. Applicant requests 2 planning board special permits for a fast food restaurant and outside seating accessory to the fast food restaurant in an industrial corridor district pursuant to 68-466.1G and L2. Applicant also requests a waiver of requirements outlined in 68-4661L, which requires fast food restaurants to be located at a signalized intersection. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of this application. Good evening, Ms. DiNicola.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appearing on behalf of the applicant, Eugene L. DiNicola, 200 Railroad Avenue, Sayville, New York. Mr. Chairman, someone left all of their goodies here, so I'll just put it on the table.
Thank you.
What? That's not mine. I don't know whose it is. I think it was a prior application, Bracco. The applicant is requesting a planning board special permit for a fast food restaurant with a drive-through pursuant to section 68-466.1L subsection 2, a planning board special permit for outdoor seating as accessory to a permitted fast food restaurant, waiver of the requirement that said use be located at a signalized intersection on Veterans Memorial Highway, and parking relaxations. Now, I have handed up a package for the board to follow me in my presentation. On top, the first exhibit, if you will, is the proposed site plan of the existing site. And it is also on the board to my right. with the elevations beneath of the proposed restaurant.
Mr. Nicola, can I just stop you for 1 second? Since we all have that, can you turn that around so anybody who's here on this app to see the application can see what you're talking about?
Okay, the subject parcel is located on the north side of Veterans Memorial Highway between Louis Kossuth Avenue on the west and Fureisen Avenue on the east, hamlet of Ronkonkoma. To the north is a large industrial building which extends from Fureisen Avenue to Louis Kossuth Avenue. The signage on the building indicates that it's Delalio Sod Farm and Detail Karting. You'll notice that large building to the north of the colored site plan, which is on the first page of the exhibit. To the east across Fureisen Avenue is a multi-tenant industrial building, number 3385. It has various tenants in there, All Island Tool, Phi, PHI Hose and Fittings, New York Easy Epoxy and Overlay. Again, you'll see the size of the building on the east side of Fureisen Avenue, extending south to north. To the west, across Louis Kossuth Avenue, is a multi-tenant shopping center, check cashing, restaurant, tattoo studio, riding and saddlery. And to the north of that multi-tenant shopping center is the RC Truck Equipment. And again, you'll notice it on the aerial site plan submitted. The area immediately surrounding the subject site has developed with industrial buildings, office buildings, and neighborhood strip shopping centers. Now, the subject parcel is zoned Industrial Corridor District, ICD. The subject site contains approximately 107,660 square feet of plot area, or approximately 2.5 acres. It has frontage on Veterans Memorial Highway of approximately 411 feet, street frontage on Kossuth of 220, and Fureisen of 316. The subject parcel has erected thereon a one-story building on the westerly portion of the premises with attendant parking facilities. Now, the parking extends along the entire northerly portion of the premises from Louis Kossuth to Fureisen Avenue. There's also some additional parking on the east side of the building because Fureisen Avenue has two curb cuts, which I will get to. There's a curb cut on Fureisen at the northeasterly corner of the portion of the property, and there's a curb cut on Kossuth at the northwesterly portion of the premises. The second curb cut on Fureisen is north of Veterans Memorial Highway. That second curb cut, by the way, will be closed if the application is approved. The existing building is occupied, that's the existing building on the west side of the property, is occupied as an office building with some warehouse space. It has a total square foot area of 20,108 square feet. The easterly portion of the site, as you will note, is vacant except for the parking stalls, which extend again along the northerly portion, and there is some parking on the east side of the building extending east to Fureisen Avenue. Now, the applicant proposes to develop a 2,200 square foot Starbucks restaurant with a drive-through window. It will have outdoor seating and a 20-car queue line. You'll notice the queue line on the exhibit on the first page. It will also have additional parking. If you notice, the queue line circles around, and there is additional parking that will be constructed in that area between the queue as it comes around to the restaurant. The proposed Starbucks restaurant will be centrally located on the site, adjacent to the existing office building. The proposed Starbucks restaurant will be set back from Veterans Highway approximately 106 feet. The queue line for the drive-through will commence approximately 30 feet west of the entrance at the curb cut on Furizon Avenue and extend around as noted on the site plan. The queue line will have a bypass lane should any vehicle not wish to remain on the queue line for the drive-through window. Following the any patron's purchase at the drive-through, the patron then can exit the site from either curb cut on Furizon or on Lewis Kossuth Avenue. If they go north, that's fine. If they go south, they go to Vets Highway, and it's a right turn situation to follow the traffic westbound on Veterans Memorial Highway. The restaurant will contain 28 indoor seats and 7 outdoor seats. The site will have 92 parking stalls. 119 are required, so the applicant is asking for a relaxation. However, the number of parking stalls are more than sufficient for the proposed uses on the site. The applicant will construct a monument-style ground sign at the corner of Veterans Memorial Highway and Furizon Avenue. The site will have 38,600 square feet of landscape area, or 36% of the site, and it'll have 30,600 square feet will be in the front yard. So the Veterans Memorial Highway and Furizon and Lewis Kossuth will have very nice landscaped frontages. The hours of operation will be from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m., and that's 7 days a week. The peak hours of operation are between 7 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. The total number of employees anticipated to be employed, the total number of employees between 25 and 30, with the number of employees on the site at the peak hours between 8 and 10 employees. No alcoholic beverages will be sold. The outdoor seating restrictions will be complied with as set forth in section 68-466.1, subsection G, 1 through 5. In that, outdoor seating is for dining purposes only. No alcoholic beverages will be sold. No loudspeakers, live entertainment, or dancing will be permitted. The outdoor seating will be adjacent to the Starbucks building and will not encroach onto any sidewalk. Obviously, it's 106 feet from Vets Highway, so any type of encroachment onto a sidewalk is almost not applicable, obviously. The outdoor seating will only be permitted between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m., and it will be 150 feet or greater distance from any residence. We're surrounded by industrial and office and shopping centers, so that will not be an issue. Now, the applicant will have a cross-access with the office building to the west, and there will be a canopy, so anyone wanting to go from the office building into the Starbucks won't even have to go out in the rain. There'll be a canopy between the two buildings. For the special permits requested this evening, the ordinance requires that a traffic and roadway analysis be prepared by a traffic engineer, and that has been done. A traffic impact study was prepared by the firm of VHB Engineering and was submitted with the application. I have Patrick Lenahan, traffic engineer, professional engineer, present this evening, and he will submit some testimony with regard to the traffic study and the issue regarding signalized intersection. The proposed site meets the density requirements of section 68-470D for the proposed fast food restaurant with a drive-through. That is 60,000 square feet of plot area and 150 feet of frontage on Vets Highway and 150 feet of frontage on secondary roads, which the proposal completely meets and exceeds. Now, with regard to special exception determinations, if these special permits are approved by this board, the proposed uses will not prevent the orderly and reasonable use of adjacent properties or of properties in adjacent use districts. The proposed uses will not prevent the orderly and reasonable use of permitted or legally established uses in the use district or adjacent use districts. The health, safety, comfort, welfare, convenience, or order of the town of Islip will not be adversely affected. The uses will be in harmony with and promote the general purposes and intent of the ordinance. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to call Patrick Lenahan to submit some testimony.
Mr. Nicole, the big question for me is, and we'll obviously get that presentation, is the town board obviously passed a code that says you need to be at a signalized intersection. Differentiate for me why this piece of property, if it's approved this evening, we're not going to have every other piece of property who's not at a signalized intersection along Vets Highway comes in and asks for a fast food restaurant or something along those lines. To differentiate for me why, in this case, we should make an exception.
Well, I'll leave that to the traffic engineer, but I consider this a unique location in that we go street to street, Louis Kossuth to Furizon Avenue. We have curb cuts on both streets. We control the entire frontage along Veterans Memorial Highway. The traffic on Veterans Memorial Highway goes west in a westerly direction only in front of the site. So a vehicle traveling, and let's use Veterans Memorial Highway as the issue, traveling westbound on Veterans Memorial Highway can turn, there's a sign at the corner of Furizon, turn right on Furizon, go into the northerly curb cut, which is, let's say 300 feet north of Vets Highway, enter the queue line, get their coffee or whatever they want at Starbucks, and either go out Furizon and turn right. They're going to make a right turn going with traffic, or go out Louis Kossuth. And if they go south to Vets Highway, they make a right-hand turn to go with traffic with Vets Highway. So it's not like you have any left-hand turns occurring at this location. If they go north, they can, there actually is a local route to Remington, and Remington does have a traffic signal. But again, Mr. Lenahan will address that. But I think this is a unique property with the access that does not actually require a signalized intersection.
So in your opinion, then, any piece of property along Vets Highway that has through streets, that touches on two side streets, and that there's no way to cut across to make a turn in the opposite direction of traffic, should be approved? That's
I would say, why not?
Mr. Ruggieri, and then your traffic consultant.
Yeah, Mr. DiNicola, before your traffic consultant comes up, I'd like to mention a factor that I see as a mitigating factor that I'd like to have him address when he gets up here to make his testimony. A lot of Vets Highway is 2 lanes in either direction. While this intersection at Verizon does not have a signal, it is still somewhat of a controlled intersection because it has a traffic island that is broken into a dedicated turning lane. So you just don't have 2 lanes of traffic going in one direction, 2 lanes of traffic going in the other. You have a controlled, dedicated turning lane for safer turning movements across the road. And I'm wondering if your traffic engineer would see that as a mitigating factor.
I won't speak for him, but I will let him come in and address that.
Okay.
Your traffic consultant. Yep.
Mr. Lenahan? Mr. Lenahan, you heard the question asked by Mr. Vergeri. In your presentation, would you kindly address that issue? Give your name, address, and the fact that you're a professional engineer to the board, and if you would address the traffic report that was submitted, please proceed.
Thank you, Gene. Good evening. My name is Patrick Lenahan. I'm the Director of Transportation at VHB's Hauppauge office at 100 Motor Parkway in Hauppauge. As Gene said, I am a professional engineer in New York State. VHB was engaged on this project to provide, as required, a traffic and parking study to be submitted to the town. That study was performed in accordance with standard principles and procedures to the field. It was submitted to the town, It was reviewed by the town and the town's professional traffic consultant. And it was also reviewed by the New York State Department of Transportation that has jurisdiction over Vets Highway. That study concluded that the Starbucks would have no significant adverse impact on area traffic conditions and also had information in it in support of the parking variance. Gene spent some time talking about the location of the site between the two side streets that go north from Vets Highway. And in regard to mitigating factors and the town's requirement for a traffic signal. In this instance, as was said, this section of Vets Highway, most sections of Vets Highway, in fact, contain a raised median. And here, Verizon is partially controlled in the median, allowing left turns and no through movements. And Lewis Kossuth on the west side is fully closed. So folks entering the site can do so at Verizon from both directions of travel. But the left turn out of the site, which in my opinion is key in consideration for the need for a traffic signal, a right turn out of a site is much easier to maneuver and much less disruptive than a left turn out of the site. You're only dealing with one direction of traffic at a time. And in this instance, the traffic volumes that occur on these roads, even with the proposed Starbucks, don't rise to the level where you could even consider a traffic signal. There are warrants in a federal manual of uniform traffic control devices that are legal language that don't allow you to put in a traffic light unless you hit a certain threshold combination of side street volumes and mainline volumes. And while we certainly have the mainline volumes, this doesn't come close to the side street volumes. So all those factors, the fact that the site is between two side streets with existing side streets acting as de facto entrances and exits, the median control on Vets Highway that separates the directions and ensures you won't have the left turn that most people, including traffic engineers, are most worried about, really puts this site in a situation where, in my professional opinion, you should not consider a traffic signal here. And the construction of the restaurant would not impart any traffic conditions that were poor or worrisome. So I hope that answers your question, at least to a degree. I did my best. So we covered the site access already. There are 3 curb cuts now. The one closest to Vets Highway on Verizon would be closed. That will put the site access, the sole site access, further north from Vets Highway. That, as well as no curb cut on Vets Highway, the major street, are good arterial management practices in terms of safety and traffic flow. We talked about the intersections, the medians. Okay, I got thrown off script here with the question at the beginning. Verizon is partially closed. Lewis Kossuth is completely closed. Now, when we think about the traffic flow in the vicinity of this site, we talked about the volumes a little bit, we talked about the access points, but to really get an understanding of how it works, there are relatively low volumes on the southbound approach at Verizon and Lewis Kossuth, but the volumes on Vets Highway are not low, as we all know. But there is a signal just west at Sycamore, and that signal turns over constantly. Red, green, red, green, red, green. And if you go out and observe traffic at these 2 locations, that signal imparts large gaps in traffic on Vets Highway. So while we consider Vets Highway to be a very busy arterial, if you were sitting on Verizon or Lewis Kossuth to make a right turn on Vets Highway, there are large periods of time when the light on Sycamore is red and there are little or no vehicles passing you. So folks have no problem moving off the side street to westbound Vets Highway. Your consultant asked us also to look at what our impacts might be to the signal immediately to the west, which is Remington and Washington. So he provided us with some information from a BOLA application on the northwest corner. And we looked at the capacity of that intersection and what we might do there. And the queuing in the westbound left turn lane, and concluded that we would not have any impact of any significance at that intersection either. With respect to traffic generation, we're talking, first of all, a Starbucks. Literature tells us about 90% of traffic that'll visit a use like this is passed by. And what I mean by that is those are vehicles already on the road passing the site. We took a conservative approach and assumed only 50% in all of our analysis. So with that assumption, we would see about 55 new trips to the site and from the site in the heaviest peak hour, which makes sense, is the weekday AM peak hour. Folks tend to pick up their coffee on their way to work in the morning. So when we look at the effect of that traffic on the system of roadways, we find small increases in delay on the side streets, but nothing of any significant negative nature. We talked in some detail already about the signalized intersection. Again, the location, access on side streets that exist already, right turns and right turns out of the side street, and volumes in operation that clearly would not indicate any need for a traffic signal at this location. At the request of your traffic consultant, we did forward the application to the New York State Department of Transportation for their review, as it's on a state highway. They reviewed the study. They didn't have any comments on our procedures or conclusions. The only thing they asked is that we update as necessary the sidewalk on the 454 frontage and the handicap ramps at the two intersections to meet ADA requirements, and we will do that. In regard to parking, we're seeking some relief from parking. There is a section of the report that supports the variance. Based on town code, as Gene said, we would require 123 parking stalls. Using published data from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which the board is probably familiar with, from engineers like myself, we find a peak combined actual demand that will occur of the site projected at about 60 vehicles. So we are very confident that there will be adequate parking on the site. In fact, your review consultant concurred in his review of our study. Gene mentioned the queuing for the drive-through lane, 22 vehicles and a bypass lane. The town code, I believe, is 12. So we greatly exceed that number, and I can't imagine there would ever be a problem in terms of the queuing on the site.
So let me ask you this one question that still, I don't think it's been answered for me. If we approve this, and in most intersections along there, either have the median or a turn lane to get into that side street. So we end up having people come out and they go make a U-turn either at a signalized intersection or they make the U-turn at the next opportunity for U-turn. If we approve this one, and I'm okay with the parking, I'm okay with the queue, I'm okay with all of that, the landscaping, it's all fine. My one concern here is if we approve this application, unless you differentiate it, the way that the office market is going, the way that the industrial market is going, people are going to look to convert properties. They're going to look to come in here and put 6 fast food restaurants along Vets Memorial Highway. What the traffic consultant didn't speak to, and I'll ask our traffic consultant to comment on that, is what happens if we approve this one, 5 other applications come in to put in the same exact thing along Vets Highway? What does that cumulative effect have on Vets Highway, the traffic turning off and those coming out and making U-turns to go back in the other direction? So that's why I'm asking you to differentiate this property against others. Because if we set a precedent this evening, we've set a precedent, which is undoing what the town board put in place. And what does that do to the traffic and what does that do to that corridor? That's my question for you, Mr. DiNicola. The rest, I'm okay with. You don't have to speak to that. That's what my concern is.
I understand the question. I guess the differentiating factor is the control on the medians, the fact that we don't have left turns out, but beyond that,
Just, I mean, most properties have the same exact setup. There is controlled medians in the middle, so they have no left turns out as well.
right. But in this case, looking at the detailed traffic flow and the details of the actual application, we would never rise to that level. I understand your question. I do. I don't know the impetus for that requirement. From a traffic standpoint, I'm not sure, I don't want to poo-poo it or anything. I don't. But, in this particular instance, if someone came in with 3 fast food restaurants on one block, you might clearly meet a signal warrant on Vets Highway. You may need to open the median on Vets Highway. There are larger applications, larger traffic generators where that would be appropriate.
Mr. Bruno has a question.
Mr. Lanahan, I'm going to stay on this same subject, I'm afraid, for a moment. When we consider why that was in the code, there are 2 things you said I totally agree with. Traffic engineers are always worried about the left turn, and you said the Starbucks is generally passed by traffic. Agree with both of those, which is what brings the problem about. If I'm going eastbound on Vets Highway, you've laid out very easily how I can get into your site, out of your site, and head westbound.
Mhm.
But what if I was passed by traffic going eastbound? Now I've got to go east again.
Correct.
And I believe that's the reasoning behind the signalized intersection. I hear what you're saying, that it's not necessarily warranted here, but I'm saying realize that if either of these had the signal, I could come back out again and easily make that left turn. And so my problem is the same as the chairman's, only to the degree that I can actually see why that was put in the code, so that people coming out in this one, if you're rising to Louis Kossuth, don't have to keep going west when they want to go east. That's my concern as well about it, is not only do we set the precedent, but for me, I can see why the traffic engineers that were involved in the code put that in. So that's my issue with it.
Okay. First to the pass-by issue. There is another Starbucks location about 3/4 of a mile east on the eastbound side of Vets Highway near Johnson Avenue. So if I'm on Vets Highway and I want my cup of coffee, I am very likely going to stay on Vets Highway and do a right in and out at Johnson Avenue rather than do that circular type maneuver that we're talking about. There's a Dunkin' Donuts on the eastbound side to the west by Old Nichols Road, Suffolk Avenue. There's a Dunkin' Donuts on Lakeland Avenue. These particular uses really thrive on convenience. So the number of persons who will be coming into the site eastbound, I would expect would be significantly lower than the ones westbound. That said, it's not going to be 0. So as I talked of previous, this specific situation with the traffic light at Sycamore, and I was out there again this morning watching, that traffic light turns over and westbound Vets Highway gets a red light. There is a significant period of time, 15, 20 seconds or so, where there's no westbound traffic crossing the front of these 2 intersections. You can actually sit there and there's nothing there. And you can watch folks leave Louis Kossuth, make a right turn, move over into the left lane, unencumbered, to the traffic signal at Remington and Washington, and make a left turn under a fully protected left turn arrow. So at this location, this specific location, they can do that. And Gene mentioned they could also go a half a block north to 6th, which brings them to Remington, and they can go to the traffic light southbound directly.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in closing, based on my detailed study, it's my professional opinion that the operation of the site as proposed will not have any significant adverse impact on traffic or parking. And that's the end of my presentation. If there are any more questions.
We'll come back. We're over your 30 minutes, so we'll come back after we will have more questions.
Thank you.
Ms. Dina Kohler, anything you want to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, I believe we have addressed the traffic issue, which was the critical issue and the uniqueness of this particular site. There are the gaps which Mr. Lenahan referred to. And I would simply say that, I mean, it's a Starbucks. It's a very, I guess people like their Starbucks coffee. I can't afford it. But if someone is going eastbound on Vets Highway, I don't know that they're going to make that maneuver to make the left-hand turn, go into the Starbucks, come around and go back. I mean, they'll go to another coffee place, or like the Starbucks at Johnson Avenue. I mean, people know the area for the most part, and I think this would be a very safe operation traffic-wise, and I would respectfully request that the board approve this application.
Thank you. I just say if you're going for Starbucks, you're going for Starbucks. You'll make the U-turn. The other one that you referenced on Johnson Avenue doesn't have a drive-through, which I think is a very different crowd in terms of who gets out of their car and who doesn't. But again, we'll look at that and see if we can differentiate it. That's my threshold question. We'll go to public comment, and then we'll come back after a staff report for questions. Mr.
Thank you,
Brown.
Mr. Chairman.
Jill Bothwell?
Hi. I live on Pure Ison Avenue, and I'm just concerned about the traffic light and the amount of traffic that's going to be coming in. He spoke about the side street volume. The side street volume, I think, is going to increase because you're coming off Vets Highway. You have to turn down Pure Ison to go into their establishment. So I'm just a little nervous. I'm sorry. So I'm just worried about entering and exiting the Starbucks because you have to come down Pure Ison and then either exit Pure Ison or exit Louis Cassuth. Also, the light on Sycamore, he's saying does control the traffic, but now with all that congestion, if you stopped at Sycamore, now the traffic's coming, is it going to be all backed up coming down Pure Ison? Because there's only 2 blocks from Sycamore. So now is that going to be congested coming in? And it's a residential area. I know we have businesses at the top of the block, but most of those businesses really run from like maybe 8 to 6, but not at the nighttime hours. And also Pure Ison is the only block that comes across Vets, which you guys had already said. So that is a concern for me also. So that's really all that I was concerned about.
Thank you. Did anyone come in late who did not fill out a card or wish to be heard? Ma'am, come on up. Please fill out a card afterwards.
Good evening. My name is Denise Schwartz, and I live at 1943 Flurizon Avenue. My main concern is traffic spillage onto Flurizon Avenue. In looking at other Starbucks, and I know that he said there's, I think, 20 cars that can be waiting to the drive-through. I have seen others, such as the one on Sunrise Highway by Meat Farms, where it is totally backed up and then backed up onto Sunrise Highway, and my concern would be a backup now onto Vets Highway. Now, I must drive on a different Veterans Highway than the gentleman here who says that there's blocks of. I try to get off that street every morning for work, and it takes a long time to get off of Vets Highway as it is, even with the light at Sycamore, because it appears with that light, then people are making a right-hand turn from Alexander Avenue. So it is, to me, it's just a concern, for the traffic spilling over into a residential area. And I'm sure you've heard it a million times, for the taxes that we pay. I just think it's very unfair. And I have nothing against Starbucks, and I have nothing against, nice companies such as them coming into our community. But I would just wish them to be nice neighbors and maybe just take a real look at this traffic study. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Good evening, Wayne Cronk. I reside at 2020 Furasian Avenue. We've lived there for 37 years, and we have seen many changes in this particular intersection over the several decades that we've been there. And I had a couple of concerns and questions. Red Apple Chinese, Wendy's, and McDonald's all have access directly to Vets Highway. Why does this have to have access from Furasian or Kossuth? Even the Starbucks that was mentioned earlier, that is east of this location, has an entrance from Vets Highway, not from a side road. The Sycamore light does regulate traffic running east and west by allowing traffic from north and south to cross over and make rights and lefts. So yes, there are opportunities to get onto the Vets Highway access when Sycamore light changes, but you still have to be cautious and you still have to be concerned about cars that have now turned onto Vets Highway. It is not an on-off switch for traffic. And by the way, Sycamore is not west of this intersection, it's east. Other access, other buildings like La Villada and Red Apple Chinese are also restaurants that have access directly to Vets Highway, not on side roads. And all of those restaurants I've just mentioned all have traffic signals. The reason traffic signal would be important for this particular location is because if people leave from this location going on to Vets Highway, and if they want to then make that left-hand turn to head east on Vets, they will have to cross 2 lanes of traffic and then get into the turning lane, a 3rd lane, and then wait at that light. That's something that many of us do every morning by going over to Goldbach and going through that cut through on the opposite of Furasian. But we're residents. We're not 60, 70, 80, 90 people in the morning during rush hour trying to access Vets Highway, where if you've driven Vets Highway in the morning, the speeds could be anywhere from 40 to 75 miles an hour. And that's a lot of traffic coming from a restaurant onto Vets Highway without access to a turning signal. Thank you.
Thank you. I thought there was one other hand. Was there another? Anyone else? There we are. No? Anyone else wish to be heard on this application? Ma'am.
Hi, I'm Cindy Cronk from 2020 Furasian Avenue. My concerns there, I watch at the bus stops, a lot of kids getting on and off the bus, and people come flying down that road and they run past the stop sign. Now you're going to increase the traffic down there, which is going to cause more issues. The other issue is where they're putting the Starbucks is very close to the high school. So now you're going to have high school kids pulling in and pulling out and trying to get onto Vets Highway. And if the traffic survey was done correctly, you would see there are a lot of accidents. I'm talking 4 or 5 a week at the corner of Furasian and Vets Highway. Okay, let's see. The other question is why didn't they consider doing it at the corner of Remington and Vets Highway? There's an empty lot there that's for sale. I don't understand why they didn't just go there. There is a light there. Also, this building is very big for Starbucks. I don't want to see it get opened up to something else as well once Starbucks gets approved. Usually Starbucks is little. And again, I agree that if anybody ever goes past the Starbucks line, those lines go out onto the main road. So now they're either going to go out down Furasian or they're going to go down Vets Highway, which is going to cause traffic issues. Also, he made a statement that people could then go down to 6th Street and go out Lewis Kossuth or go out Goldbach or come in that way. But what about the people that live on that street that now you're increasing their traffic there also? Okay, I've been there for 37 years like my husband, and I've seen a lot. And like when McDonald's came in, McDonald's took over a hamburger place and they were not allowed to put a drive-through in. That was the code back then. It wasn't until Wendy's came in, which of course is at a light, that they opened up the fact that you could have a drive-through. So we as neighbors were very concerned that this was going to open up a whole thing. Like you said, all these fast food restaurants coming in. Okay, and again, I just want to reiterate, the Starbucks on Vets Highway does not have a drive-through. The Dunkin' Donuts on Lakeland does not have a drive-through. And the Dunkin' Donuts down in Islandia is on and off Vets Highway, not on and off a side road. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to be heard? Ma'am, come on up.
My name is Claire Goldsboro. I live 6 houses from the corner that's not showing where the houses are. There's a corner of 6th and Furizon. I live 6 houses up. And that's a stop sign for the kids to get off the bus, on and off the buses. And there's a lot of trash being left over in that street, on 6th Street, by a lot of those other stores that are around, the deli, the Carvel. You know, the neighbors over there are complaining about all the trash that they're finding over there. So it's already a highly traveled space without this drive-through coming through. And all the numbers that they were saying about how long it takes to get through these intersections are incorrect. I drive there. I've been there on that street for over 27 years. My husband's lived in that house for over 60 years. We live in his house that he grew up in. And the neighbor next door has been there for even longer. And she and I are all agreeing this is not correct. These numbers are not correct. She takes extra time to get around so she doesn't get stuck at traffic lights and so that she doesn't have to make left-hand turns. And it's very dangerous getting on and off where we live. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am? Oh, was it Shooties?
I'm sorry, I just wanted to point out also that years ago, my husband and I had put through requests, which you people did do for us. On Furizon Avenue, they put no parking signs in front of the Marble Works Company and the Elite. And well, in front of Marble Works, they're always being taken down. So people are always parking on there. I had somebody, a police officer, who was coming down Furizon Avenue and Marble Works, someone from Marble Works came out and hit him. Okay? It's not a safe area for a lot of people. Also, the cutoff from Furizon Avenue, there's coming down from, I guess from east heading west, you pass Speedway, and then there was a cutoff for Furizon. I was at the board meeting for this as well, and that cutoff was put there so the tractor trailers, the big trucks that go to Speedway that then want to get food, could park there. So it didn't block up Speedway and didn't block up Vets Highway. That's what that cutoff is supposed to be for. I just wanted people to know that.
Anyone else who has not been heard wish to be heard? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a report, then we'll come back for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the northwest corner of Vets Highway and Furizon Avenue in Ronkonkoma. Tonight, the applicant is looking to improve the eastern portion of the property with the Starbucks drive-through and accessory outside seating. The Starbucks will be approximately 2,200 square feet with 28 seats inside and 7 seats outside. The applicant is also requesting a waiver of the requirement outlined in the ICD code that requires drive-through restaurants to be located at a signalized intersection along with a parking relaxation. The applicant did provide a traffic impact study, which was reviewed by the town's traffic consultant, and there were no substantial comments. However, it did conclude that the westbound and southbound left turn movements at the intersection experienced poor levels of service and long delays, which would be moderately impacted by this development. The proposed site plan does provide for a substantial car queue, I think about 20 cars, and landscaping along Vets Highway. However, the ICD study did encourage the use of plazas between buildings that include outside seating, superior landscaping, water features, sculptures, things like that. The applicant did provide a small plaza. However, it could use some additional features to better keep in line with the study. In addition, the board's going to have to consider the waiver requested and determine how it could impact future development along the corridor. This requirement was provided in order to ensure safer car movements and traffic, in addition to preventing an overabundance of drive-throughs and keeping this area a true research and industrial corridor. The study limited retail nodes at signalized intersections in order to curtail a surplus in these uses and just provide support services to employees that work along the corridor. Based on this, planning recommends the board reserve decision in order to weigh the impacts of the waiver proposed and determine if any other site improvements could be added to keep better in line with the study.
Thank you. Ms. DiNicola, there's one question that was outstanding that was asked, which is Did you speak to the state at all about access, if it were to be approved, about access from Vets Highway directly as opposed to going down the side streets?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
There was a question that was posed as to whether or not, why there's no access, no proposed access on Vets Highway versus the side streets.
Well, I think, the state would prefer that there be no access. We thought that would be even a better plan to come in from the side streets because most of the traffic is going to generate from Vets and back to Vets. They're really not going to be going up into the community, which is north of 6th Street. Again, for myself, I thought that it would be a safer situation not to have direct access to Veterans Memorial Highway. However, maybe Mr. Lenahan can better answer that question.
And what is your peak traffic count, peak hour traffic count?
Good evening again. The potential for access to Vets Highway. It's a widely accepted and I think good traffic engineering and access management principle to limit the number of driveways on a major roadway, such as Vets Highway. The potential for accident occurrence, the potential for inefficient movement of traffic on the main roadway decreases with additional curb cuts on the main roadway. That's a access management principle that the DOT exercises when they can. The fact that this particular site stretches between the two side streets that have access to Vets Highway, my strong sense is if we sought a curb cut from DOT on Vets Highway, we wouldn't get it. And this, in my opinion, is a better design from that perspective. Traffic count on Vets Highway?
No traffic count in and out of your site?
In and out of my site.
How many cars are you bringing in?
Okay. Okay, so we look at 3 peak periods as traffic engineers in general, and this site is no different. We look at the weekday AM commuter peak, which is an hour between 7 and 9 in the morning when most folks are traveling to work. We look at 4 to 6 in the afternoon, the PM peak commuter hour when most folks are traveling home. There's a bit more shopping that occurs then, however. And then we look at the Saturday midday when folks are out and about. They tend to get up a little later. As I said, this particular use has a high rate of pass-by traffic. If we look without pass-by, if we were able to,
The pass-by is going to go down the side street, so that's, I'm trying to gauge how much traffic will push into the side street, so let's include pass-by
I
traffic.
understand. I was going to say, if we put the pass-by completely to the side, we would expect to see on these two side streets, and it's going to be split between the two of them, about 110 entering vehicles and 110 exiting vehicles in a 1 hour period. So that's a vehicle and a half in and a vehicle and a half out in an hour, maybe a little bit more on average. In the PM peak hour, these uses are less busy. That number is just under 50 in each direction, in and out. And on Saturday, we're up just a little bit south of 100. So AM is the heaviest, Saturday is next, and PM is the lowest. And those are the volumes that were modeled on the two side streets.
And the 110 numbers without pass-by traffic?
Yes.
What does that bring it up to with pass-by traffic?
No, that's
Including it?
full load,
Full load.
no
So
pass-by
without,
credit.
Okay, I got it.
Pass-by credit in our report, we cut that in half. The documentation tells us it's actually 90% pass-by.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there further questions from the board? So, Ms. DiNicola, my concern is, certainly for me that has not been addressed, is how we differentiate this property and stop the proliferation of, one, more fast food applications coming in here, and two, those that currently exist without drive-throughs for coming in here and now seeking to get a drive-through put in. Happy to reserve and give you the opportunity to submit something on that, but from where I stand right now, I'm one person on the board. I don't see this as a viable application. In fact, because of what the town code says, and I've seen no differentiation this evening that'll stop the proliferation of other applications from coming in here and creating a bad precedent. So you can speak to it tonight, or you can submit something for the record afterwards.
Well, I think your traffic consultant in his report indicated that the proposed use will not have an adverse impact on the traffic issues. So, I mean, we do have, again, we have a unique site in that we have access from two side streets. We are not accessing directly Veterans Highway. The traffic moves in one direction. It's only right turn in and right turn out. There are gaps in the traffic. I have been at the site since the application came into my office, at least a dozen occasions. I have never had a problem turning right on Fureisen, going through the existing existing parking area, the Kasuth, going out, turning right. I have never had an issue, and I don't believe in the traffic reports, I don't believe there is an accident problem at these intersections. Pat, would you just make that point to the chairman that there has been no.
Sure. There are some accidents at any intersection, especially on a major street. There is nothing in the accident history, and it's in the traffic report and was reviewed by your consultant, that indicates any particular accident problem at this location. I know we just heard some testimony about number of accidents that occur in a week. The recorded data tells us a very, very different story. Thank you.
Ms. Wozniak, and I don't know if you have the answer to this question, but has our traffic consultant looked at specifically for that piece of property being converted, or can we pose to them the question, and I'd like an answer from this from our traffic consultant, what is the impact cumulatively if multiple fast food restaurants are approved in that corridor along Vets Highway? If that has not been answered, I'd like that question to get answered by our consultant.
It was not answered, but I'll.
And that's sort of the problem. That's where I'm coming back to my same problem that I come up with. It's a beautiful application. It's one that actually has a queue that can put all the cars off the roadway so it doesn't spill out. There's parking. It looks nice. We're adding landscaping. But there's a traffic concern. There's a reason why the town board passed that. They put a code in place that talks about signalized intersections. There are other fast food restaurants along that corridor who would love to have a drive-through tomorrow. And I would not doubt the fact that if we approve this, McDonald's and others might not even come in here tomorrow with applications to do that. So it's not just the traffic study for your one piece of property, it's the cumulative effect if there are multiple properties in that vicinity who now ask for the same thing.
All of those properties would have to have two side roads with curb cuts, 300 feet north of Vets, 250 feet or 220 feet north of Vets, where they had a right turn in and a right turn out situation. I don't believe, and I would defer to planning to make that study. I don't believe there are that many sites along the Vets Highway that would meet that criteria. We have two side streets. The property owner owns from one street to the other street, which this property owner does. He owns the existing office building, and have that type of situation. I think that's unique in that regard alone, and there are probably no other properties that would have that capability of having two side street accesses and with right turn out only onto the Vets.
That certainly may be your only.
I believe the concern for traffic is, I want to use the word overblown, but I don't believe the traffic issues are as critical as you may concern, Mr. Chairman.
Right. And let me just say that, I mean, your only distinguishing factor, I think, that may be actual in this case is the fact that you have two side streets on the property. Everything else, to me, would apply universally to the rest of the properties there. And again, it's the cumulative effect. What happens if people wanting to convert properties, businesses being vacant, land's out there, fast food seems to be popping up everywhere. If we approve this and we don't distinguish it and others come in before us, and I think we're going to pose this question to our traffic consultant, what happens to the traffic along there and the traffic movement again, not only going in one direction, but all those people that now have crossed over are now going to shoot across 2 lanes to make a U-turn to go back in the other direction once we permit that. So I think we need to answer those questions. Certainly, the application as it stands right now for me would not be something that I would support. But you wanted to add something?
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. In terms of cumulative impacts, one of the things that we try very hard to do, and we work cooperatively with your planning department, when we look at a site and we're doing a traffic study, we look at a build year, a couple or several years in the future, depending on, the nature of the project, how long the approval process, how long it would take to construct and occupy. And we query the planning staff for what we call other planned developments. So if there is anything else that the town is aware of on the corridor, for instance, we will include the traffic from those developments in our traffic study. For instance, we included the Bowler Market proposed on that one corner, and there was a warehouse. Some applications we've done in Islip, we get a laundry list of 10 or 12.
The problem here is that we're not going to include something that would otherwise not be approved because town code prohibits it. We can certainly give you a list of saying, have your traffic consultant add in 6 fast food restaurants in that corridor.
But I guess the end of my point is knowing what we can know and doing the detailed traffic impact study. We've shown that this particular site works. That may not be the case for the next one. So the board does have the opportunity to look at these as they come in. And if there is some tipping point sometime in the future, if the applicant does the traffic study the way they should do it, you should see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yes, yeah, I have, my office, my building is on Remington. So, and I've been in the area 30 years. I don't think the traffic in the morning heading west on this side of the road, there's traffic. In the evening, there's not heading west. Same thing on the opposite side of the road. In the evening, going home, there's lots of traffic. Personally, being down Remington, the Sun Nation, which is a tremendous, I don't even know how many employees they have and everything, to feed the restaurants, the delis, and those things. There are a lot of people that use Sixth to run through the back roads and that. I don't think that the traffic as of right now is the issue. I agree with my chairman that the setting of precedent is more concerning. And the application itself, without the traffic signal law that we have, the ordinance, I think is a great application. But I think it's something that we have to take a hard look at and to see if we're setting a precedent or not.
Well, again, I mean, I think this particular application is distinguishable based on its configuration, based on the roads, based on its access to 2 streets. And if another application does come in, I mean, precedent is one thing, but you're not absolutely bound as a board to grant an application that does not meet the criteria that this application does. Just because you grant it to me or to this applicant does not mean that the next application is going to have the same criteria, the same layout. And your traffic expert that reviewed the traffic impact study, I really don't believe that they were that they raised that any real concerns that this would be a dangerous use to place at this location traffic-wise. The next application you'll look at and you'll make a determination whether or not it meets the criteria of what you're setting for this particular one. I understand this is probably the first one that you're considering, but this applicant has laid it out in such a fashion that it is as safe as a signalized intersection.
If further questions from the board? Ms. Nicole, I mean, certainly if you want to submit more information that distinguishes it, I can tell you there's been plenty of interest into the planning department from those who would consider putting a fast food restaurant with a drive-through along there, but have been told because of the fact that there's a town code that says you need to be at a signalized intersection. a lot of them may have walked away. And creating a precedent for me is a problem. The fact that obviously we can distinguish it as a board, we also opened up the door for then, as you know, as an attorney, is for an Article 78 and let a state Supreme Court judge make that decision versus this board once we've already created one exception to the rule as opposed to being firm. But again, you know, my recommendation would be to reserve decisions, let you submit the information you want, have Ms. Wozniak speak to our traffic consultant, and I'd like to know what the cumulative effect is if we do that. And maybe go back and look at the history of when the town board passed that code, some of the reasons that were brought up as to
See if
why
we
they
can
put it in
submit
place.
something additional, because I understand Ms. Wozniak is going to request that the application be reserved. Am I correct? And maybe you might, instead of closing it, leave it open if we can have any additional information that may satisfy the board.
Thank you. Is there a
But
motion?
I think this board also can distinguish this application from another application. I think it has that capability of doing so.
Thank you. Mr. Frugieri.
Okay, with that said, I'll make a motion to close this public hearing, but keep the written comment period open for a period of, say, 30 days, so that additional information could be obtained to address some of the issues that we heard this evening. When we start talking about a precedent, I think it's important that this board understands what the scope of that precedent might be. I mean, we heard multiple fast food restaurants. I don't know if there are other suitable sites along Vets Highway. Well, we have to know how many suitable sites along this area in Vets Highway would be suitable for a fast food type restaurant, so that we can assess the cumulative impacts of any precedent that might be set. But other than that, I think this is a good application. I think it would, the queuing is outstanding for a Starbucks location, the increased landscaping and the aesthetic value along Veteran Memorial Highway, I think are all positives. So let's see if we can get past this one hurdle here with the precedent and the traffic issue. With the traffic, I mean, New York State DOT has reviewed it and approved it. So that gives me a little bit of comfort on that. So with that, again, I'll reserve decision on this, or recommend reserving decision on this and keeping the comment period open.
It's a motion by Mr. Frugieri to reserve decision, close the public hearing, leave the public comment period open for written comments for 30 days, and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're reserved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you very much for your time. Have a good evening.
Next item on the agenda, Kevin Guilfoyle, Len Crick, PB 2023-012, east side of Somerset Drive, 1,135 feet north of Patchogue Holbrook Road, Holbrook 35 Somerset Drive. Applicant requests a modification of a planning board condition which prohibits accessory apartments within Somerset Estates, Holbrook. Good evening to the applicant. Is there an applicant? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hand that up to the board. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, planning staff. My name is Kevin Guilfoyle. I'm here with my partner, Len Crick of Island Wide Permit Services, 86 Center Street, Ronkonkoma, New York, along with the homeowners, Conrad and Susan Bergman, and Trish Calandra, who's from Thrive, a company called Thrive, which is a housing advocate for their clients. Mr. Chairman, we're here before you seeking the modification of a covenant restricting accessory apartments. We looked at this and determined that after consideration and speaking with Trish, that the only option we had was an accessory apartment. And she'll get into that a little bit, where the state requires, quote unquote, a separate living area. Thereby a two-family, single-family use would not be applicable here. For the record, I've submitted letters from 7 neighbors. And at this point, like now, I would like to read one of them into the record.
Please do, and just so you know, we have the letters you submitted. We'll make those part of the record.
Okay, thank you. All right. So as far as the property itself, it is all CO'd.
An extension was built in 2017. They want to convert that into an accessory apartment. The extension is approximately 860 square feet, and I've informed them that it's a little large for an accessory apartment within the town of Islip, and they will make the changes, modifications necessary to comply with the accessory apartment regulations. That being said, my clients have been there since the beginning, 1995. The sons have grown up in that neighborhood. They're now 29 years old. Robbie is with us, one of the twin boys. Lee is homesick. They wanted to come here tonight because they wanted to impress upon the board how much they want to stay in their community. They grew up there. All the neighbors know and love them. They're familiar in Holbrook all the time, and it would be beneficial to them with limited disruption if they could stay there. The house itself, from the street, appears to be a single-family home, just like the majority of the other homes in the neighborhood. The extension is to the rear of the property, very, very slightly visible from the street. We believe that approving this application, although it could, quote unquote, set a precedent, and I was concerned about that when I first took the case. However, I do believe that either the law department or the planning department could craft some kind of verbiage for a special permit, especially for a medical waiver such as this.
And Mr. Goffa, I've seen emails back and forth. We've debated this. I think Mr. Gonzalez might have sent you those conditions. I don't know if you had a chance to review them, but I think it distinguishes it.
Now,
If you're
Mr.
okay
Chairman,
with
I
those
would like to
conditions.
bring up Trish Calandra, who's with, she's an advocate for the Bergmans, and she could speak a little bit why it has to be an accessory apartment. Trish?
Mr. Goffa, I think the board is okay with it. I think the question for you is, are you okay with the conditions that we proposed? That you saw from Mr. Gonzalez? I mean, you certainly can speak to it. I think I've seen email traffic back and forth and support the application. The question is, are you okay with the conditions that was submitted? I think we all understand the need. You're certainly welcome to make the presentation, but I know that we support it.
Okay, right behind me. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Good evening, and thank you for your time and attention tonight. My name is Trish Calandra. I'm the principal of Thrive, which is today's housing resources and initiatives in self-direction. I'm going to be brief and try to describe to you how people are supported in the world of New York State OPWDD. And first, you need to understand what we call certified housing, and that is your traditional group homes or independent residential IRAs. They are certified nonprofit voluntary agencies where the state assurance teams visits annually, and they adhere to strict standards, and then the state certifies that setting. This is also subject to PADAVAN, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Most people recognize this housing as group of people living together, and that they all sort of travel in a pack. I'm sure you've seen the vans pull up and everybody sort of gets out. So we've come a long way in this world from this model being the only way or process to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So there's a program called Self-Direction. It is a newer model of service with funding from the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities that gives people the chance to choose their own services, and you get full budget authority so you can live the life that you want. So when people self-direct their services, they can have an increased flexibility to choose where they live, the staff they want to work with, and on a schedule that works best for them, along with this funding to attend community activities where they bring that spending power to their local community. The self-direction program gives people more control over how they live their life, just like the rest of us, and people can continue to live where they grew up, in a community that they know and love. But to access the needed housing subsidy and the funding and the supports for this model, there are certain rules that need to be adhered to that are from the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities. The Bergman family has the plan for their son's future. Under these rules, they would need to be the creation of an accessory apartment where the parents can live and the boys remain in the main part of the house. And for future planning, that accessory apartment allows continuity of care where a living caregiver can step in when the parents are no longer here. This way the boys get to live to age in place. I think you'll all see the benefits to the accessory apartment, not just for these two wonderful young men, but for the community as well. If you have any questions, I have a printout of this so you can understand. There is what we call an administrative directive memorandum that's put out by OPWDD that clearly states that if a family is to live together, they do not qualify for this type of funding. But if they made a separate dwelling unit, and it has to be separate with a C of O, they will then provide that care and service to the family. So it's an unfortunate circumstance, but in a way that really does give people the options to live a better life than what I just described to you with everybody unloading off of a bus.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Guilfoyle, do you want me to go to a staff report, or you want to? Okay. Mr. Guilfoyle, why don't I do the public portion and the staff report while you guys discuss that?
I'm sorry?
You want to discuss that amongst yourselves while we do the next steps in this
Yes.
process? So why don't you do that? Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard on this that came in, did not fill out a card? I do not see anyone, so I'm going to go to Mr. Gonzalez to do a staff report, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a half-acre property currently improved with a single-family dwelling, CO'd in 1995, located in the Residence AA Zone development of Somerset Estates, which is a 1989 major subdivision. As part of that development, the covenants and restrictions stated that the lots located within the subdivision of Somerset Estates are located within a single-family residential zoning district, and no two-family use or accessory apartments are permitted within this zone. The applicant's proposal is to request modification of that restriction to allow for an accessory apartment within the existing single-family dwelling. Per the town code, the accessory apartment section was added after that development was enacted in 1992. A temporary special exception for two-family family use only has been available through the ZBA since 1974. However, that is not the proposal before the board tonight. Per the applicant's representative, the proposed accessory apartment would be contained within the existing footprint of the dwelling, which would be occupied by the owner's two autistic sons. They have all lived together at this location since 1995. However, at this point in time, the owners wanted to ensure suitable arrangements now and for the future, given their family's unique situation. In the future, when the parents no longer live at the house, they envision a resident caretaker to live in the apartment who will live in the main, and then the sons will live in the main part of the house. Per the zoning division, this would correctly fall under an accessory apartment definition, not the two-family use. Should the board grant this modification, the applicant must proceed to the Zoning Board of Appeals and obtain a special exception for an accessory apartment. That exception has additional requirements in regards to square footage, occupancy, renewal process every 3 years, or upon transfer of title that safeguards the town. The planning board conditions for this application have been drafted to further ensure a blanket accessory apartment is not granted. It is germane specifically to this proposal, as it will not transfer to any other owner, and it does not apply to any other property within Somerset Estates. Any future request would be required to go before the planning board and obtain another special exception from the ZBA. Given the unique circumstance of the family and the willingness of the applicants to abide by the strict requirements, as long as the applicant is in agreement with the conditions, staff recommends the board grant the application to that.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the board? Ms. Guilfoyle, the only question, are you okay with the,
Yes, I reviewed it with the homeowner. We're all in agreement.
okay. Is there a motion? Anyone? Mr. Brown? Oh, Mr. Moriarty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would make a motion, we close the public hearing, grant the application subject to the conditions that were just accepted by the applicant.
Thank you. It's motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the conditions. Is there a second by Ms. Cruz? All in favor? Opposed, abstentions? Good luck in front of the zoning board. Next item on the agenda, Randall Whitebroad, Esquire PB 2023-016, south side of Main Street, State Route 27A, 110 feet east of Monell Avenue, Islip 484 Main Street. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a mixed-use building in the business district pursuant to 68-257.1G. Site plan modifications may be requested as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. Randall Whitebroad, 144 West Main Street, Bay Shore, New York. While I am the applicant, this is for the benefit of the property owner, Demoro Properties LLC. So I am not the owner. I didn't intend to be the applicant, but I am the attorney for the landowner. So I guess I'm applying on his behalf. I know it's a long night. You have a big agenda. I have received the proposed conditions from Kelly. I am in agreement with him, the landowners as well. If there's any questions regarding the property application, fire away.
Great presentation. We're going to go.
Short and sweet. I've been doing this
Anybody wish
quite
to
a
be
long
heard on
time.
this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the south side of Main Street, approximately 110 feet east of Monell Avenue in Islip, and it's improved with a two-story commercial building sealed for retail and office space. Tonight, the applicant's looking to legalize a three-bedroom apartment on the second floor and obtain a mixed-use building special permit. The applicant is not proposing any exterior changes, and the ground floor is going to remain retail space. Mixed-use buildings are supported by planning in downtowns, and the proposal for a single apartment unit won't have any adverse or substantial impact on parking or traffic in the adjacent area. Based on this, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Brown.
Could I make one request to
yes.
revise the application name to Demoro Properties LLC and not myself?
We'll make that part of your motion.
okay.
Thank you.
You
We are
just
going to-
confused Mr. Brown there.
You're
That
going
one
to
got-
change the name on the application to?
Demoro Properties LLC, DIMAURO Properties.
Okay, with that being said, I'm going to make an application to close the public hearing and grant the application.
It's a motion by Mr. Brown to change the application to Demaro LLC and to close the public hearing and grant the application. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Ruggieri. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions? The application is granted. Have a good evening.
Great, thank you. Have a good night.
Item 9 on the agenda, planning board application public hearing, Pollo Camparo of New York LLC, PB 2023-025, west side of Wheeler Road, County Route 17, 103.5 feet south of Motor Parkway, County Route 67, Central Islip, 146 Wheeler Road. Applicant requests a modification of planning board special permit conditions associated with PB 2013-030 in order to increase the size of an existing restaurant. Site plan modifications may also be requested as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening. Matthew Aylward, AYLWARD, with R&M Engineering, 50 Elm Street in Huntington, appearing on behalf of Pollo Campero. The property we're discussing here today is the Vanderbilt Plaza, which is a 9-acre shopping center 100 feet south of Motor Parkway on Wheeler Road. Presently, Pollo Campero has a 40-seat restaurant. They'd like to expand into a vacant storefront next to them, or a vacant store next to them, to increase to an 84-seat restaurant. We're seeking to modify the PB 2013-030 special permit conditions to allow for this 84-seat restaurant. We believe there's sufficient parking on the property. I have our traffic engineer here with us to discuss that. I also have the architect, if you'd like to pick his brain on the interior improvements that are being made. There are no changes to the facade. Everything's internal.
Thank you. If we have questions, we'll come back. Anybody who came in late wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the west side of Wheeler Road, south of Motor Parkway in Central Islip. It's an improved with an 85,000 square foot multi-tenant shopping center that was CO'd in 1973. Today, the applicant wishes to modify previous special permit conditions in order to increase the size of an existing restaurant. The expansion will almost double the size of the restaurant, having 84 seats and 3,755 square feet of gross floor area. The expansion should have minimal impact on the existing parking and traffic within the center. In addition, the shopping center is in general conformance with the most recent approved site plan. However, the buffer to the west of the property is lacking vegetation and can use additional plantings. Planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which requires buffer plantings as directed by engineering.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant or Ms. Wozniak? Not seeing any. Anything further from the applicant? Is there a motion? Mr. Frugieri.
I'll make a motion that we close the hearing and grant this application, subject to the covenants and restrictions.
Motion by Mr. Frugieri to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? The application is granted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10 on the agenda, Planning Board application, public hearing, Carolina Gandini, CESO, PB 2023-027, west side of Saxon Avenue, 85 feet north of Delaware Street, Bay Shore, 100 Saxon Avenue. Applicant requests a planning board special permit for a vehicle repair use in the Industrial 1 District pursuant to 68-340.1B. Site plan modifications are also requested as part of the application. Good evening.
No. And Carolina Gandini with CSO from Akron, Ohio, and representing Safe Light. They're taking over an former carpet retail place, in a Safe Light, which everybody knows is the common replace all your windshields. Now with the technology, they have them cars coming in. They work Monday to Friday from 8 to 5 p.m. and Saturday from 8 to 3 p.m. There will be no cars parked outside, and they will have to make appointments to come in and bring the cars. We request a special permit for repair car, and also we have to do modifications of the site since we have to add overhead doors. We do have the buffer of all the trees in front of the building, which we are not touching, and we also do an ADA accessible parking and ramp to the space to be in compliance. The amount of employees that we'll have is 8 to 12 max, and that includes 2 to 3 people at the office, and the rest is repair.
Thank you. I do not have any cards. Anybody come in wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn to Ms. Wozniak for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The property is located on the west side of Saxon Avenue in Bay Shore and is improved with a 6,000 square foot industrial building formerly occupied by Pat's Carpet. Tonight, the applicant is looking to convert the building into a vehicle repair shop for a Safe Light Auto Glass. Although the location for a vehicle repair shop is concerning, given there are residences across the street, the company does not conduct any body or engine work to vehicles, but rather solely focuses on glass repair. In addition, all work is conducted indoors, and there will be no outdoor overnight parking of vehicles on site. The application will require site plan review, along with several site plan modifications, which include a 37% parking relaxation and approval to allow installation of 4 overhead doors facing Saxon Avenue. It is important to note that the property currently maintains 16 feet of landscaping along Saxon, which is proposed to be reduced to 8 feet. The applicant has also provided several other site plans for existing Safe Light locations and has stated that 22 stalls is appropriate for their operations. In addition, the applicant has agreed to provide superior landscaping and screen plantings along Saxon to help screen the overhead doors as much as possible. Based on the nature of the business operation solely conducting auto glass repair, planning recommends the board grant the application subject to the attached conditions, which limit the vehicle repair to glass repair replacement and require decorative fencing and screen plantings along Saxon to help aid in screening those overhead doors.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Yeah. Go ahead. Kelly, it's important to distinguish again what they're doing for screening purposes, the landscaping. Can you just reiterate that and stress what they're doing for improvements along Saxon Avenue?
Yeah, sure. If you take a look at the proposed site plan modification conditions, I put some stuff in there that basically requires, they put in a decorative fence along Saxon Avenue, superior landscaping treatment. They are meeting the minimum required landscaping along Saxon Avenue. And if you take a look at the elevations, the proposed overhead doors are a little bit decorative in nature, so it's not the ugliest thing to look at.
No, they're pretty nice, actually.
Yeah. No, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we stress that on the record as we're approving doors on facing the residences. And also, there's obviously a need to use these doors as part of the business operation as opposed to being there for no reason. You need to pull the cars into the building, correct? Yes. And not work on them in the parking lot.
No.
Yes.
No, that's why they have the mobile people.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, and I'd prefer to have the cars across from the residential, come inside the building, close the doors, and work on the cars with the glass. It is a nice-looking building compared to what you're looking at as a neighbor. So I am in favor of the application, Mr. Chairman. I'd love to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to close the public hearing and grant the application.
A motion Motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing, grant the application. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Bruno. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Thank you. Town Board application, public hearing, Bayport Collision Center, CZ 2023-009, northeast corner of Montauk Highway, State Route 27A and Lakeview Avenue, Bayport, 405 Lakeview Avenue. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC 1474 in order to allow an approximately 250 square foot building addition built into a required 15-foot landscape buffer associated with the vehicle repair shop. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Hansley Mohan of Brown Altman and Leo, 538 Broad Hollow Road, Suite 301 West, Melville, New York, 11747. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. Also with me tonight is John Tufel of JL Drafting Expediting, who prepared the site plan and is prepared to answer any questions that the board may have with respect to the site plan itself. Being distributed to the board now is a set of exhibits, which I will reference in my testimony. And just to be as brief as possible as a bit of background, this property is located at the northeast corner of the intersection of Montauk Highway and Lakeview Avenue in Bayport. The property is surrounded by a mix of commercial, residential, and industrial uses. To the north, there are several single-family residential developments in the Residence A district. To the west, across Lakeview Avenue, is a residential development located in the Residence CA district. Abutting the property to the east is a sports bar establishment, and further east along Montauk Highway is a mediation service. To the south across Montauk Highway is a self-service car wash and building materials store. And to the southwest is a martial arts school, tire shop, and garage door supplier. According to the building division certificate, the property has operated as an auto repair shop since 1966, which has been included as Exhibit 1 in the package. The property was purchased by the current owner approximately 5 years ago from the Suffolk County Land Bank, which is a county entity charged with the sale and/or transfer of delinquent tax properties with significant environmental issues. Included in the exhibit package as Exhibit 2 are several photographs that show the existing of the condition of the site prior to the sale, as well as the current condition of the site. I think it goes without saying the notable improvements that have been made since the transfer of ownership. As you will see at the existing conditions of the photos of the existing conditions of the site, there are not a lot of positive things that could be said about it. And as was mentioned previously, the site had a number of significant environmental issues. Aside from the aesthetic issues, as you will notice from the pictures, there was a parking trailer and overgrown grass, and the property the prior owner failed to pay their property taxes, which is why it had to be purchased from the Suffolk County Land Bank. Shortly after acquiring the property, the current owner made a significant economic investment in the property and remediated all of the environmental issues and made a number of significant aesthetic improvements. On June 12, 2020, the county issued a letter of no further action confirming that all required site remediation had been completed. The owner then performed outside stucco work, redid the offices with ceramic tile, new doors, moldings, sheetrocks, etc. The shop area has new cement floors, and the roof has been redone to address a leaking issue. The ceiling in the entire shop area has also been renovated. Included in the package as Exhibit 3 is a colored rendering of the site that best illustrates the vast improvements to the property. In 1966, the town board approved the change of zone application for the property from Industrial 1 to Business 3 in TC 1474. As a condition of TC 1474, the town board required that a 15-foot buffer be maintained between the building and the adjacent residential property to the north. As shown on the site plan prepared by JL Drafting and submitted as Exhibit 4, the northern property line slopes downward from the northwest corner to the northeast corner. At some point within the last 5 years, a minor bump out addition of approximately 250 square feet was added to the building. Given the sloping nature of the property line, the building addition encroaches into that residential buffer required by TC 1474. As shown on the site plan, the site currently maintains most of the required buffer. The encroachment from the addition begins at approximately 13.3 feet at its longest point and tapers down to 10.7 feet at its closest point. Tonight, the applicant requests a modification of this condition to permit the existing addition to remain within the residential buffer area. It is important to note that the applicant is sensitive to the adjacent residential neighbors to the north. For that reason, we are proposing a robust planting of 6-foot tall hedges in that buffer area to provide visual screening and sound attenuation. The 15-foot buffer will also continue to be maintained to the extent possible as shown on the site plan. Also submitted in the exhibit package is a number of letters of support that the applicant has received in support of the application and the business overall. assume that it will be read into the record, so I'll save the board time and not read them myself. As you will see from reading the letters of support, the consensus is that the property has undergone a significant transformation within the last 5 years, and both the residents and the abutting business owners are very supportive of the applicant's business and have noted the significant aesthetic improvements that have been made. At this time, I will call on John Tufeld to the stand to discuss the site plan in further detail.
Thank you.
John Tufel, professional engineer, 707 Route 110, Farmingdale, New York. We're basically repaving the existing parking area, providing 7 parking spaces and 1 special needs parking space, providing curbs as required, and 3 landscape buffers, 1 on the north, 1 on the west, and 1 on the south side. Relief is required for a portion of the existing building, which is less than 15 feet from the north property line. As discussed previously, we're requesting a 10.7-foot north yard setback to the northeast corner of the existing building, which is less than the 15 feet required by ordinance. And this is due to the irregular shape of the north property line, which angles south towards the building. We'd also like to note that due to the irregular angle of the north property line, only less than 1/2 of the north side of the building is less than 15 feet from the property line. And again, as previously mentioned, we're proposing 6-foot tall ilex trees in the north buffer that we feel will provide more than adequate screening. And of course, if the board has any questions on the site plan, we'd be happy to answer them now.
Thank you. We'll come back after the staff report.
Thank you.
Anything further from the applicant? Okay, thank you. Is anyone here wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'll turn to Mr. Colgan for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As stated by the applicant, this application proposes to legalize an extension of a building constructed into a 15-foot buffer required by covenant. Prior to this, the property had been the subject of a change of zone from Industrial 1 to Business 3 back in 1966. The expansion in question appears to have been built between 2016 and 2020, according to aerial photography. The conceptual site plan shows 19% overall landscaping and falls short of providing the minimum 8 foot of width of landscaping along street frontages. The subject property is within the Bayport Overlay District, which requires 5 feet of the front yard be set aside for a future shared use path, prohibits parking within the front yard, requires New England style or traditional architectural character, prefers natural building materials as opposed to stucco, concrete, and ethos, and requires that rooftop equipment be screened. Signs are required to be constructed with high-quality materials and should not be spotlighted, externally lit, or backlit with a diffused light source. The proposal as shown does not conform with these specific components of the Bayport Overlay District. The applicant is requesting a 71% overall parking relaxation. The prior site plan submitted and approved had 10 spots plus the 5 bays. Variances will be needed from the Zoning Board of Appeals for side and rear yard setbacks. Given that there are prior approvals for the existing use on the site, some of the relaxations from the Bayport Overlay District may be justified. The staff would like to work with the applicant to come as close to compliance with the new standards as possible, as well as some of the public comments received by the staff via the town's email. Therefore, the staff recommends that the board reserve decision tonight so we can work on these issues with the applicant.
Questions from the board, Mr. Brown?
Yeah, for the applicant. So we're looking at an expansion that was done to the property
Correct.
without the town's approval, correct?
Correct.
All right, into the use zone,
I'm sorry, say that again?
into the use zone, into the,
The buffer area? Correct.
I'm in the playground business, use zone. You're looking for a 71% parking relaxation.
Correct.
And what is the nature of the business that's going to be here?
It will maintain the historical use of the property and operate as an auto repair use.
Right. And with 71%, you're in the auto business with 71% relaxation you're looking for. The buffer to the north, Did you mention something with, did you have support from the resident?
We had letters of support that we received from nearby residents and other members of the community in support of the changes that we have made into improving the property, given its original condition compared to the way it appears today.
Okay, did that include the house directly to the north?
I would have to confirm. We have not received a letter of support from them at this time.
Okay. All right, I mean, I would grant you the time, to work with staff. As of right now, I don't think as is, I could support it.
If I may add, just to address the issue regarding to the requested parking relaxation, we have been informed by the applicant that the site functions primarily as a satellite site. Cars will be coming into the site. They'll receive an estimate for the work that needs to be done. But for all the work that does need to be done, it will be transported to another site within the area. The applicant owns several other auto repair uses within Bayport. So with respect to the parking relaxation, the primary bulk of the work will not be done at this site. So that is our position as far as justifying the parking relaxation requested. But we are more than willing to work with the town and kind of getting as close to conformance as possible.
Yeah, two of the letters that I think I read by email said that the cars are not contained on the site. I don't know. So that's obviously a concern we have. Mr. Moriarty?
That was the issue I was raising as well. I mean, one of the objections we heard from the community was the number of overnight cars being stored on the property. And Mr. Brown is exactly right. Given the significant relaxation of parking, we're just concerned we're not going to slip back into the exact same problem that neighbors have been complaining about for quite some time. So if you could work with staff on that issue, particularly give us some comfort that will not become a continuing problem, I think that would go a long way towards making the application work.
Thank you.
And certainly, no cars after they're repaired showing up with for sale signs on it.
Absolutely.
Are there further questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd make a motion to close the public hearing and reserve decision this evening.
It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to close the public hearing and reserve decision. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions were reserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next item on the agenda, I'll just note for the record that Mr. Bruno is recusing. Town Board application public hearing, Islip Yards LLC, CZ 2023-010, west side of Sweeneydale Avenue, Bay Shore, 0 and 105 Sweeneydale. Applicant requests a modification of covenants and restrictions associated with TC-5173 in order to reduce the required buffer from 90 feet to 83 feet, allow outdoor storage 83 feet from the western property line instead of 90 feet, and remove the requirement of a chain link fence along the eastern edge of the required buffer. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Daniel Baker from Greenberg Traurig LLP at 900 Stewart Avenue in Garden City, New York. I am appearing tonight on behalf of the applicant Islip Yards LLC, as well as their associated company, the Lantec Group. I am joined by two of the principals tonight, and we are here for property at 105 Sweeneydale Road in Bay Shore. I'll try to keep it brief, and certainly you can ask any questions of me or my clients if you wish. But the subject property was previously granted a change of zone by the town board in 2014 to allow for the construction of office and industrial space at Lantec's business operation. The site is a meticulously maintained property, currently improved with an office building, an industrial building, and associated outdoor storage on the southern portion of the property. While there are residential properties to the west and rear of the subject property, the surrounding neighborhood is mostly a heavily industrialized area of the town. Tonight's application is seeking to modify the original covenants and restrictions approved in 2014 as they relate to the existing buffer at the property. The existing buffer is, according to the CNR, supposed to be 90 feet, but is in fact 83 feet, so there's a 7-foot encroachment into what was the approved buffer and listed in the covenants and restrictions. I would point out that typically the code provides for a 35-foot buffer, so what was proposed and what exists is more than double what is in the town code. The reason for our request tonight is primarily due to the placement of HVAC equipment and a PSEG transformer in that 7-foot area that goes from the 90 to 83 feet. And in fact, these pieces of equipment were all put in at the time of the construction of the building or buildings. So they've been there. It's not something that's been put in there new. It's been there since the property was improved. I will also point out, and I've sent some pictures around that you can all look at, and I think it gives a pretty good indication of what exists now, and you get to see not only what's in that 7-foot area, but also what the berm looks like. And I would also point out that the berm,
I'm just going to direct you to two questions I think we
Sure
have.
thing.
One is, what is the decibel level of those units since they're now closer to the property line of the one residence? And my second question is, part of the original conditions was some fencing where applicable. I don't think that fencing was ever put in place. Those are my two questions.
so I'll jump right to them. As to decibel levels, I can't give you the exact numbers, but I would suggest that 83 feet and 90 feet, which is blocked by the existing berm, again, pointing to the pictures and my own personal inspection of the property this past week, the berm ranges from, I would say, anywhere from 15 feet above grade to probably as much as about 30 feet, if not more. It's heavily treed, heavily wooded, and landscaped. So anything getting through there noise-wise can't make much of a difference with that extra 7 feet. In terms of the fencing, the proposed fence was a 4-foot-high fence that would be on the eastern part of the buffer, which is in essence the bottom of the berm. The way that it exists now is probably the most practical most practical way that this property could operate back there. The way the gas-fired systems are, you've got a lot of heat coming out of them. Keeping that area free and clear is responsible and something that was discussed, as I understand it, with the fire marshal at the time that these were being located there, in addition to the PSEG placement of their transformer. What they have now is an ability to keep it free of debris, keep it free of leaves and anything else, branches that might fall from the trees. Again, if you look at the pictures, you'll see that the berm itself is pretty much undisturbed and has been since this was constructed. There was no real cut into the berm. They just went to the edge of the berm. So to the edge of the berm is clean. It's got some crushed stone or gravel in a lot of the area. It makes for a clean and safe area. So our sense is that putting any kind of fence in there isn't going to do anything for anybody, but in fact might hinder the property and the ability to keep it clean and free of debris, leaves, et cetera.
That was an original agreement when this was originally approved, correct? That the
It was.
fencing would go in?
It was one of the listed covenants.
Sure. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, is the applicant,
But
here tonight? Is the applicant here with you tonight?
The applicant is here.
Could you come up for a minute?
Sure.
We're all familiar with the application. We've gone through all of them and everything. My only question is, would you agree to put the fence in as agreed upon?
Sure. If that was important to the board, we would gladly put the fence in.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm good.
Thank you.
Michael Ryan.
Anything else?
No, we can get around.
Can I finish?
It'll be tight, but to put the fence in to make it go away, we'll be okay.
All right. Is there anything further you want to add to your application?
No, that's fine.
Okay, so anybody here wish to be heard on this application? Not seeing anyone, I'm going to turn to Mr. Colgan for a report. We'll come back for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As stated by the applicant, this application proposes to legalize an expansion of outside storage, HVAC, and utility units within a required 90-foot buffer. Prior to this, the property had been the subject of a change of zone to Industrial 2 back in 2014. Since that time, the applicant has developed the site, including the outside storage area and 3-story office building. The outside storage area and HVAC units for the office building is approximately 5 feet into the required 90-foot buffer area. The berm in the buffer is approximately 15 feet high and appears to adequately screen from view the outside storage and units from the adjacent residences. The berm appears minimally disturbed in the areas encroached upon based on a site inspection. The one suggestion the staff would have in terms of putting up the fence, the board may want to consider limiting it to the direction of the town engineer, just in those instances where there isn't already a concrete block enclosure, because that's effectively serving the purpose of the fence. We also want to limit any further disruption to that berm as much as possible. That was the whole impetus of allowing this change of zone to go through. So the less we limit that, the more we limit disturbance to the berm, I think that's better for the residences, because that's going to be the sensitive area. So if we leave up to the direction of the town engineer, the staff has no objection to installing the fence.
Questions from the board? Anything further from the applicant? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Brown?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to close the hearing and grant the application, subject to the fence going in.
There's a motion by Mr. Brown to close the public hearing and grant the application subject to the fence. Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. Item 12 on the agenda, I'm sorry, item 13 on the agenda. Planning Board decision item, Albert Monarov, SP 2020-060R1, west side of Fifth Avenue, 383.9 feet south of Spur Drive, Bay Shore, 1451 and 1455 Fifth Avenue. Applicant requests permission to install parking stalls at a 60-degree angle instead of the required 90 degrees. Is the applicant here? Not seeing the applicant, I'll turn to Mr. Colgan, is it?
Yep.
For report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This subject property received a change of zone to GST and has previously been granted various parking, landscaping, and buffer relaxations. The board approved a change in the ingress egress as per a requirement from Suffolk County Department of Public Works. County has further required that these spaces along the eastern side of the property be angled to reinforce the one-way site circulation and deter egress out of the eastern curb cut where the county had concerns over motorist visibility. The revised layout does not reduce the number of approved overall parking spaces for the site and is anticipated to improve motorist safety along Fifth Avenue. Based on the foregoing, staff recommends the board grant the request for the angled parking.
Any questions for Mr. Colgan? Not seeing any, is there a motion? Mr. Moriarty?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd make a motion that we grant the application as presented.
It's a motion by Mr. Moriarty to grant the application. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Cruz. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted. This one's still on? The next one's on? Item 14 is adjourned this evening. Item 15, Town Board application recommendation item, Eric Romer, CZ 2022-025, southwest corner of Sunrise Highway, State Route 27 and Sycamore Avenue, Oakdale, 4490 Sunrise Highway. Applicant requests a change of zone from Business 1 to Business 3 and a Town Board special permit for a gasoline service station pursuant to 68-302C and a Planning Board special permit for a convenience market pursuant to 68-302.1D. Site plan modifications are required as part of this application. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Anthony Guardino. I'm a partner with the law firm of Farrell, Fritz, and Hobhog, New York, representing the applicant. As you know, this application pertains to a proposed 7-Eleven with gas in Oakdale. The request that the applicant has made here is for a change of zone to B3. So we're seeking a planning board recommendation. We're also seeking a planning board recommendation with regard to a town board special permit that will be needed for the sale of gasoline. And of course, we need a town planning board special permit for the convenience store and some site modifications. We were before this board for a public hearing back in October of 2022. I think it was October 26th of 2022. And at that time, several issues were raised, you may recall, primarily regarding access on Sunrise Highway. And since that time, Stonefield Engineering and both Amanda LaRosa and Zach Chaplin are here from Stonefield. They had been working with the New York State Department of Transportation as well as town planning to modify the site plan and come up with an acceptable point of access that was that worked for 7-Eleven and more importantly was safe for the public. So that has been done.
Mr. Guardino, do you have any small site plans that?
I don't only because we kind of were still changing. I don't know if you have.
We just circulate some board members want to see it while you're speaking. Go ahead.
I'm not sure that one is totally accurate though, right? Mostly accurate? Oh, good. Okay, I apologize. I usually come prepared with exhibits. But I didn't have, yeah, so, I'm just about done. The only change was obviously to the curb cut on Sunrise Highway. And then there were also some requests made by Planning Department with regard to aligning a curb cut on Sycamore with the curb cut across the way, I think is McDonald's there. And that shifted the curb cut a little bit north. There was a request to increase the buffer along the south side of the property where the parking was originally located to get it closer to the 35 feet that the town planning department had requested. We have since made that modification. And then I think there was a request to also align a crosswalk, which I'll leave to Zach and Amanda to explain. And then the final one was this afternoon, and that's why I didn't have a an amended plan, there was a request to land bank a couple of parking spaces on the western side. So we are seeking to land bank 2 of the spaces that are furthest north, which are closest to the throat, the entranceway for the curb cut. So that's essentially the changes. I don't know, Amanda, Zach, if you want to, I don't know if you want to hear from
Why don't we
them.
do a staff report
Why
if
don't we
there
do
are
a staff
questions?
report? That's fine. That makes more sense.
Hogan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. The primary concerns raised at the public hearing were the conditions of the existing site, the use of the balance of the site that's not going to be leased by the applicant, rezoning near a residential area, the environmental impacts of the gas station, the Sunrise Highway entrances, and overall traffic. Mr. Guardino mentioned that the applicant has since relocated all the Sunrise Highway access as far west as possible. This has met the approval of both New York State DOT and was also further recommended by the town's traffic consultant. And the town's traffic consultant also commented that the analyses conducted for the traffic study indicate that the highway network can accommodate the additional traffic. The applicant stated at the public hearing that the county has control over the underground storage and will be meeting all their requirements to address any environmental concerns. Given that the traffic impacts have been evaluated and the site will be improved over the status quo, and we've seen improved traffic and site circulation improvements, the staff recommends that the board grant the application subject to attached covenants and restrictions.
Any questions from the board?
None.
Thank you for working with our planning staff and
Thank
making the
you.
site work.
Thank you.
Is there
Always a
motion?
pleasure. Thank you.
Is there a motion? Ms. Cruz?
Oops. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to grant the application based on the covenants and restrictions.
There's a motion by Ms. Cruz to grant the application subject to the covenants and restrictions. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moriarty. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, the application is granted.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you, Sean. Thanks.
Is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Motion by Mr. Moriarty to adjourn, second by Mr. Brown. All in favor? Opposed, abstentions, we're adjourned.